Chapter 924. Every orc warrior was told that their mission this time was to save the world. Even though it sounded ridiculous, the orcs cherished this brand new territory after losing their homeland and being slaves for more than 10 years. Although it was barren, it was still much better than our world, which was shrinking every year and constantly rotting and collapsing. It was many times better than being a slave who had nothing. Upon hearing that the damned devils dared to encroach on their new territory, the orcs roared and swore to teach them a lesson. With the shaman's explanation and the magnified projection, they knew very well how powerful their enemies were and how huge their bodies were. They had also imagined that there would be an endless sea of corpses in front of them, or an army of demons with war banners covering the sky. But no one had imagined that the enemies would appear in such a situation. If the enemies didn't cross the mountain directly, they would take the normal route and pass through Mount Hygel's Grey Valley to the south before heading to Fellwood Forest to the west. Then, they would crash into the only entrance of Mount Hygel and the fortified camp that the orcs built over the past few days. The Burning Legion, who should have been enraged by the death of their frontline commander, didn't speed up or slow down. Instead, they reached Grey Valley at a speed of 150 kilometers per day. Even though the undead army had paid the price of marching day and night and far exceeded the limits of an ordinary army, it was still within the budget of the three main factions. Then, the Burning Legion ignored Fellwood Forest and arrived at the mountain pass of Mount Hygel. They relied on a gigantic monster that could make most of the defensive lines in this world a joke. Even from Duque's perspective as a transmigrator, this was an exaggerated and ridiculous matter. Under the image transmission of the mage's eyes, Duque saw a boss that shouldn't be here. While the tribe at the foot of the mountain was shocked by the sudden explosion, Duque had already sketched the outline of the gigantic monster with the system's assistance. Duque finally knew what Archimonde was doing in the boundless ocean. The orcs at the foot of the mountain camp were shocked by the landslide 3 kilometers away. Sar could only blankly shout, "Everyone, be on guard." At that time, Duque decisively used the backdoor that the night elves had left for him to activate the teleportation according to the coordinates he had set in the orc camp. In less than 10 seconds, Duque's figure appeared in the middle of the tribe's campsite. Of course, Sal noticed the light of the portal. Almost as soon as Duque's figure appeared, Sal rushed over with his guards. "Marcus. Do you know what that thing is?" "I know. A burrowing worm. Let's talk about the details later. Evacuate the center of the camp immediately. It doesn't matter even if the entire camp is evacuated." Duque shouted while waving his arms and legs. Sal's face darkened. Retreating before the battle even started was definitely an insult to the bravery of the beast men. If it was someone else, he would have used the hammer of destruction to smash that guy's face into paste. But that was Duque, the brave Duke Marcus, who had just risked his life to kill a commander of the Burning Legion the day before. Even the orcs who disliked Duque had to show respect for Duque's method of going deep into the enemy's midst and seizing the flag. Sal only hesitated for a second before blowing the horn that represented the retreat of the entire army. The order conveyed by the horn could not be completely carried out. Only the Warsong clan could carry out the order better. After more than 10 years of guerrilla life, they had thoroughly trained an elite and strong army. Slightly better was the Frostwolf clan. After all, it was Sal's father's clan. Sal had perfectly inherited the power of the old patriarch Durotan. Most of the other orcs from the other clans were slaves and seriously lacked discipline. It just so happened that this group of orcs was the most numerous. The orcs were in a mess, but the terrifying behemoth in the distance once again drilled into the ground and rushed towards the orc camp at a speed faster than a horse's gallop. It dug a hole in the ground like an earthworm. Every time it moved underground, it would cause the earth to bulge and shake. It was like a long-lasting earthquake that swept across the entire orc camp. Not many mortals could stand steadily in such a violent earthquake. From far to near, the ground bulged bit by bit. It was as if there was an invisible hand that could reach the heavens and the earth, pushing a hill towards the tribe's camp. Closer. Closer, closer. The tribal warriors had expressions of despair as they watched the moving hill with rocks tumbling outwards collide with the tribe's camp at high speed. In the next second, whether it was the Tauran warriors that weighed nearly a ton, the wooden walls made of huge logs that required 2 people to wrap their arms around them, or the tall arrow towers that were thick and sturdy, they were all knocked into the sky by this terrifying impact that was beyond the imagination of mortals. Not to mention the orc warriors that only weighed a mere 200 to 300 kilograms. From afar, those green orc warriors were no different from dolls. This was just the beginning. In the next moment, it was as if a long howl rose in everyone's heart. This sharp howl came from the dark underground world, from the distant ancient times, from the most ancient continent of Kalimdor, which was still ruled by the 4 ancient gods and the elemental lords. The violent howl pierced straight into the deepest part of everyone's heart, evoking their most primitive instinctive fear. It directly made everyone forget to breathe and forget their heartbeat. Those with slightly weaker physiques and willpower directly fainted because their hearts were too nervous and suddenly contracted. At this moment, the center of the entire tribe's camp exploded. Like a volcanic eruption, countless sand directly exploded from the bottom to the top. Many unlucky people who had just been knocked flying had just begun to fall from the sky, but were once again knocked into the sky by the terrifying impact. And among this group of pitiful people, there was impressively the group of priests that Duque had specially provided for the orcs. Coincidentally, the young priest, Sally May Twain, was also among them. As a priest, she had, Holy Word, Shield, a rather practical life-saving skill that was not considered heaven-defying but rather practical. As a talented priest, the moment Sally was knocked flying, she cast a Holy Word, Shield on herself that was flickering with a faint white light. The milky white light shield resisted the flying rocks very well. She even cast a levitation on herself to avoid falling to her death from a high altitude. However, in the next moment, she fell into the deepest depths of fear and despair. Because below her, the tribe's camp that was originally filled with various defensive structures had disappeared. What replaced it was a huge mouth with at least 10,000 sharp fangs that stretched out from the deep black hole. She was slowly falling into the mouth that was enough to swallow a small town. Chapter 925. Not everyone was as capable as Sally, who could cast a levitation spell on herself to slow her descent. If there were any professions in the world of Azeroth that could survive a fall from such a great height, the priests would definitely be one of them. Of course, the mages, slow fall spell, and the druids, instant bird transformation, were also godly life-saving skills. Unfortunately, this life-saving skill seemed to be more of a death torture. Many of the unfortunate orcs, due to their weight and bad luck, were not sent flying too high or too far. In the end, they fell down early. The huge scarlet mouth that seemed to have come from the underground abyss easily swallowed them along with the sand and soil, making crunching sounds of chewing. The horrifying sound of flesh being crushed and cut made Sally and the others sink into the deepest and darkest fear. She kept shouting in her heart, "You're dead." She kept shouting in her heart, "Holy light above, am I going to die? If I release the levitation spell, will it eat me like how it ate the orcs? Holy light! Will Reynold come to save me? Or will Reynold be eaten too? Forget it, Sally doesn't want Reynold to save her. Reynold, run! Run as far as you can." Sally, who was slowly descending from the sky, was scared out of her wits. She bit her lower lip hard and stared at the horrifying, wriggling mouth below her. At that moment, she saw a scene that made her heart ache. She saw Reynold. Of course, the Alliance would not let a large group of priests come to the aid of the Horde. Instead, they sent a group of 800 swordsmen. Reynold volunteered to be a protector and joined the swordsmen. Reynold did not die in the first round of attack, but he was not much better off. When the huge worm rushed out of the ground, he was sent flying to the top of a 3-story horde building. On the red umbrella-shaped roof that was commonly seen in horde buildings, Reynolds sat there like a fool. He did not do anything but watch as she slowly floated down and approached the opening and closing giant mouth of death step by step. "Reynolds, save me," Sally was like a drowning person who found her last hope. She struggled to reach out her hand to Reynolds. But, it was too far. So close yet so far away. The huge mouth below Sally suddenly extended again, splitting into 4 parts. The bottom was bright red, and the terrifying mouth was full of sharp teeth. It started to bite towards the sky. With that huge mouth as the background, Sally's graceful figure in red and white seemed so weak and helpless. Beside Reynolds was an elderly beastman warrior. He set an example for Reynolds. He suddenly charged towards a young orc warrior who was descending from the sky. His powerful profession skills allowed him to do things that mortals could not. He crossed over a dozen meters in the void and knocked the young orc away with his shoulder, sending him flying out of the devouring range of the abyss maw and falling outside. No, the young orc who was suddenly saved burst into tears because he saw the old orc who saved him falling into the huge mouth with a smile on his face. It was only at this moment that Reynolds and Sally realized at the same time that they could do this. Charge was a basic skill of every warrior profession, and Reynolds knew it as well. As long as he found the right angle, Sally might be saved. There was not much time left for Reynolds. 3 seconds. At most, he had 3 seconds left. Even if he used charge, the two of them would die together. Sally Whitemane was in a dilemma. She hoped that Reynolds would save her, but at the same time, she did not want Reynolds to die for her. The melancholy of a young girl in puberty reached its peak at this moment. Unfortunately, some people were born with courage. Some people were born with wisdom. Some people were born with luck. However, Reynolds did not have any of these. He, who was born into a family of generals, realized in this terrifying moment that he was actually King Coward. Faced with his long-awaited childhood sweetheart, Sally, who was adopted by his father, in a desperate situation, he was so weak that he did not even dare to make a move to save her. His legs, which were supposed to be extremely powerful, seemed to be filled with lead, and he could not move at all. He wanted to use charge, but he suddenly realized that his body was leaning back, and his instincts were driving him away from that terrifying place. At this moment, time seemed to freeze. Sally understood the decision of her childhood friend. Her white hair fluttered as she fell, and she was surrounded by the horrifying giant mouth that was about to close. A pure and beautiful smile bloomed on Sally's face. She gave Reynolds her last blessing, truth word, toughness. This blessing could temporarily increase the HP of the target. "Reynolds, you have to live." The girl's sincere smile was like a whip that lashed at Reynolds' soul. "No." Reynolds retreated futilely as he stretched out his powerless right hand. He could only watch as Sally was swallowed by the giant mouth. Yes, half a second later, Sally Whitemane would have become history. A miracle had happened. At the very last moment, 2 shining white magic palms suddenly appeared and grabbed Sally. Before the giant mouth closed, Sally was dragged out of the hopeless situation where she should have been dead. Not only her, but there were also dozens of priests who had used levitation, and were screaming in fear. They were also dragged out. Yes, it was very miraculous. No one would have thought that the old orc who had used charge to save the young orc and more than 10 orcs would also be pulled out. Every survivor was filled with great surprise. They turned their necks and looked for the saint who had saved their lives and souls at the last moment. They found him. Standing on the top of a tall tower, the Alliance's commander, Duke Marcus, held a staff in his left hand and a sword in his right. Around him, there were more magician hands, floating in the air, constantly saving the Horde soldiers and Alliance soldiers who had been affected. The young girl Sally's eyes couldn't help but be stunned. Duque didn't realize that he had just happened to save Sally Whitemane, one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, who was incomparably famous in history. He was feeling a headache for the boss that had appeared in front of him. System notification: the probability of the newcomer being the commander-level boss Auro is 97.22%. What was Auro? Perhaps even many veteran players before Duque transmigrated didn't know about this guy. But as a former elite team leader and the one who had held the Atish Guardian's legendary staff, Duque had participated in this guy's exploration in the game. It was a nightmare that he didn't want to recall. Chapter 926. There was Long Outyen on Earth. There was Aurora in Azeroth. Yes, it was referring to Auro, the crazy super-burrowing worm. The reason why he was called crazy was because he could be seen in any ranking of the most difficult bosses in Azeroth. Some of the rankings were first, some were third, and some were fourth. Anyway, his craziness had never dropped out of the top 5. Note that these were the rankings that were made from the time when Varian Rin was still a kid to the time when Varian's son, Anduin Varian, had grown up. It spanned across decades of Azeroth's history, and after looking at the bosses of the 7 major versions of the instance dungeons with a 3-digit number. Hence, after seeing Auro's iconic red carapace and scythe-like long legs, Duque felt a little annoyed. Damn it, I came to Azeroth to start a harem. Oh, no, I came to save the world. I didn't ask you to open the hell difficulty so easily. Speaking of which, aren't you the younger brother of the ancient god Xiaofan? The invasion of the Burning Legion has nothing to do with you 4 ancient gods. Burning Legion? If Azeroth explodes, will you 4 ancient gods still be able to survive? This time, Duque finally understood why the Archaerons would go against the course of history and stay in the endless ocean for so long just to negotiate with Xiaofan. During the Dark Empire era, when the ancient gods ran rampant, the 4 ancient gods and the Lord of Elements ruled the entire world. Before the Well of Eternity exploded, the entire southwest part of the old Kalimdor continent was Xiaofan's territory. In ancient times, after the 4 ancient gods of Azeroth were sealed in a planet by the Titans, these 4 guys did not stay still. For example, Zoth would say, "You're a lowly," to Nesario 10,000 times every day, hypnotizing the silly black dragon to become his fighter. Another example was that, according to the course of history, Xiaofan would jump out about 10 years later. Kiraj, who was in the south of Silithus, would jump out and seek death. Then, he would be killed by 40 bandit-like heroes summoned by the Alliance and the Horde. Duke hated the disgusting insect that was Oro for running off to the wrong set. However, with the experience of Baron Geddon running out to scare people during the Battle of Blackrock Mountain, Duque was a little immune to this kind of scare. It was just that, after seeing the giant sandworm boss Auro in person, he felt that the proportions were too exaggerated. Oro's leg alone was at least 300 meters long. At first, he felt that Oro's mouth was too big, but when compared to his massive body, which had a diameter of 50 to 60 meters, he felt that only such a big mouth could match his body size. Originally, when the Burning Legion fought Mount Hyjal, Duque felt that the Burning Legion was breaking the rules. Now that Auro had entered the fray, Duque felt as if his opponent was an official cheat. Damn it, how was he supposed to fight? On the other side, the tribe had been tricked. Naturally, there were people who were unhappy. Gromhell roared and leapt high into the air, preparing to use Bloodhowl to deal a heavy blow to Oro. Then, Lord Howl was amused. Oro was not just a simple giant sandworm. He had claws, and it seemed that Lord Howl's shocking roar and aura had finally alerted Oro. This giant worm with a crimson back popped out a claw that looked like a crab's claw. As one of Oro's 4 pairs of claws below his head, it was no different from a battering ram. The mighty Lord Howl was sent flying like a high fly ball in a home run. Whoosh! He flew out like a shooting star. The thick-skinned Lord Howl would definitely not die, but if his pride was damaged, Duque could not care less. Duque's face turned green. He immediately contacted the manager of Mount Hyjal through magic. "Hey! Tyrant! You see the situation at the foot of the mountain? If the night elves have any tricks up their sleeves, use them. If you leave this worm alone, you'll be able to smell Archimonde's bad breath on Mount Hyjal before noon. But, we are accumulating our strength." Tyrant seemed to be in a difficult position in the magic mirror. Duque almost cursed out loud. "There are no buts. I know how strong Archimonde's subordinates are. Without this damned worm, as long as Archimonde does not come, I can help the night elves hold on for at least 3 days. With the worm, we can't even hold on for 3 hours." At this moment, Malfurion's bearded face appeared in the magic mirror. "Plans cannot keep up with changes. Besides, we have been preparing for 10,000 years. It's not like we only have one move. Duke Marcus, can you swear to defend the mountainside for at least 24 hours with your life?" Duque gritted his teeth. "If Archimonde does not fight personally, I can." "Alright, the night elves believe you." With that, Malfurion cut off the communication. The next second, in the orc camp at the foot of the mountain, countless grass began to grow crazily. They all grew into green arrowheads the size of a human's arm, repeatedly shouting in orc language, "Danger! Danger! Please retreat quickly." Not only them, but Duque also shouted in orc language with magic amplification. "Retreat quickly! The night elves are going to use their ultimate move." Thrall's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He had painstakingly organized a 1,000-man team in the midst of the chaos. On one hand, he needed someone to cover his retreat, and on the other hand, he wanted to defend his honor by attacking this ridiculously huge worm. Unexpectedly, both Duque and the night elves announced that they were going to use their ultimate move at the same time. Woken also advised, "Retreat." They had no choice but to retreat. Even if the orcs had lost unjustly, a defeat was a defeat. Thrall gritted his teeth, but he could only give the order, "Retreat." Oro was still wreaking havoc. The huge orc camp was like a toy made of building blocks, easily smashed by his claws and twisting body. Countless broken pieces of wood and orc limbs flew into the sky and scattered in all directions. Just as Oro's rampage reached its peak, the earth suddenly shook. Thud. Thud. Dong, from the initial blurry tremor, to a clear tremor a second later, to a sharp tremor 2 seconds later. No matter how large Oro's body was, even if he did not pay attention to his surroundings, he would still realize that something was wrong. The world tree Nordrassil itself was a symbol of life, and as the world tree that repaired the wounds of the world, it was even more blessed. Mount Hyjal had always been a place where plants flourished and life flourished endlessly. But at this moment, the surrounding greenery became even more exaggerated. The thick green was like the thickest haze, swirling around Oro's massive body. Bang! With a loud bang, a massive log that would require at least 5 people to wrap their arms around it broke out of the ground and slammed into Oro's massive body. Oro did not care. With a casual wave of his scythe-like claws, the giant log was split in half. In the giant insect's mind, this might be a spell of insignificant human beings, but it didn't care. It was wrong. Chapter 927. In the blink of an eye, 12 thicker and larger logs burst out of the ground, stabbing at Oro's twisting body. This time, Oro seemed to be a little annoyed. He suddenly spun his body, turning himself and the claws on his body into a brief whirlwind. With a 360-degree slash without any blind spots, his scythe-like claws chopped the 12 logs into pieces, sending them crashing to the ground. But this was not the end. Without giving Oro the time to catch his breath, the third wave of 36 logs and the fourth wave of 108 logs arrived almost at the same time. Oro twisted his huge insect body once more, turning himself into an insectoid version of a storm of blades, easily slicing apart the giant trees that had grown out of nowhere. At this time, his rationality had already begun to warn him. More logs appeared. A moment ago, the Beastman camp was still a flat plain, but now it had suddenly turned into a lush forest. And the entire forest was still expanding outward and inward at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not only were there more logs attacking Oro, this completely abnormal forest was also attacking him from another angle, underground. That's right. Oro had burrowed into the ground. At first, it didn't feel it, but soon, it realized that its body, which was buried underground, was being strangled. Being able to burrow into the ground was an ultimate skill that he had relied on to save his life for thousands of years. Even a dragon aspect could not burrow into the ground like he did. It could be said that the ground was Oro's home field, and the ground was his proudest shield. The current situation had completely overturned his understanding. Countless powerful roots pierced deep into the ground. Not only did they grab hold of the soil, but they also quickly sealed off the tunnel that he had burrowed into. Oro had a feeling that if he wanted to go back the way he came, what awaited him would be death. He panicked. For the first time in his life, he was panicking when facing something other than his master, Thun. Almost instinctively, he moved his body, letting the parts of him that were buried deep in the ground dig out. 30 seconds later, Oro, who had never been seen in full by any mortal, finally revealed his entire body to the world. It was a 1,000-legged insect monster that was more than 1,000 meters long. On both sides of its body, there were almost countless neatly arranged legs that looked like crab claws. These slender legs were naturally not as big as the 4 pairs of large claws under the head. If each of these slender legs could still be active after being chopped off, they would definitely not be too bad if they were used as throwing poles for catapults. Just the sight of Oro's body was enough to scare trypophobia sufferers to death, and it was enough to make most people nauseous. However, since Oro dared to become a hired thug for the Burning Legion, there was naturally no reason to let him go. On both sides of the campsite at the foot of the mountain, there were many druids who looked very natural, with turf draped over their bodies. Zazasi. Zazasi. Nachonatazasai, they were like wooden stakes, standing on the mountainside, muttering druid incantations that outsiders could not understand. However, their entrance had a huge impact on the surrounding forest. It could be clearly seen that the giant tree was growing even faster and fiercer. If it had attacked at the speed of a tortoise at the start, it was really moving like a rabbit at this moment. The thick green fog greatly weakened Oro's senses. Just below his abdomen, where his senses could not reach, a giant tree that would take 6 people to wrap their arms around silently grew and stabbed towards Oro like lightning. This stab directly pierced through his abdomen and deeply into his innards. Then, the surging force of nature exploded, causing the tightly shut pores of this giant sandworm boss to suddenly open, and almost every bowl-sized hole began to spurt out yellow fluid. It was Oro's blood, as well as pieces of his innards. However, the reason why giant beasts were so difficult to deal with was because of their terrifyingly exuberant vitality. If a giant tree that would take 6 people to wrap their arms around pierced through its abdomen, even a giant dragon would die. However, for a giant sandworm that was 50 to 60 meters in diameter, this would at most be a light injury. The biological structure of an arthropod was completely different from that of a mammal. Just as more druids were preparing to do the same and stab Oro to death by stimulating the tree's rapid growth, this supergiant sandworm suddenly flipped on the ground. The sand and dust on the ground sped up and shot towards the druids on both sides of the mountain like cannonballs. Duque gasped, "Sandstorm explosion?" Duque was all too familiar with this move. This ruthless move centered around Oro had an attack range of 180 degrees. The worst part was that it would come with a 5-second-long stun. However, Oro just had to keep twisting and turning. If you were unlucky, you would be sent 4 sandstorm explosions in a row, knocking you out until you died. As the leaders, most of the druids were hit in an instant. As a result, the wild growth of the forest stopped by half. Tyrant! Duque shouted. Got it. As expected, Tyrant appeared on a higher peak. She did not know how Duque knew about her ultimate move, but the night elves did not rely solely on druids to survive. The priestesses of the Moon Maiden Temple were also freaks who practiced both magic and martial arts. Dozens of priestesses dressed in beautiful moon-white robes appeared beside Tyrant, who was riding a white tiger. They raised their arms and used their unique magnetic voices to cast spells and praise the moon goddess, Elun, whom they worshipped the most. The sky suddenly turned dark. From dawn, it suddenly turned into night. However, this kind of night was not evil darkness, but a quiet and serene night. The night sky was cloudless for thousands of miles. While Auro was distracted by the forest, a star deviated from its path. A rainbow-colored meteor streaked across the sky and crashed down. Without giving Auro any time to react, the meteor sped up again and again until it became a streak of light and crashed into Auro's head. At the last moment, Auro still instinctively tilted his head. The rainbow-colored meteor shattered one of his pincers, then pierced through the left side of his thick neck and came out from the back of his neck. Arg! Auro let out a heart-wrenching scream. Everyone could see the ghastly hole in his body. The shattered bones, internal organs, and blood all sprayed out with a bang, as if a torrential rain of blood had fallen from the sky. In that instant, everyone stopped what they were doing. Be it the retreating beastmen and humans, or the night elves who were observing from the two sides of the mountain. Everything quietened down again. Everyone looked expectantly at the huge monster that had been pierced by the meteor. Chapter 928. Die. Die. Quickly die. The three major factions that had once been at odds with each other now shared the same sentiment, which was to hope that the big bug that had turned the base camp upside down would die quickly. Auro's appearance had rendered many people's plans useless. Duque had miscalculated the ancient gods. After all, the original location of the Endless Sea should have been the territory of one of the four ancient gods, Yashaji, during the era of the ancient Dark Empire. After the Well of Eternity blew up the ancient Kalimdor continent, the High Elves who had once served the Burning Legion occupied the deep sea on the surface. In reality, the area surrounded by the whirlpool in the middle of the Endless Sea was not just seawater. There were also sporadic islands. Obviously, there were the followers of the four ancient gods left there. Then, those people introduced the Burning Legion to the four ancient gods. Auro's appearance had caused the tribe's backup plan to fail. Taking one step forward and calculating 3 steps ahead was a necessary trait of a leader. Thrall letting the tribe join the temporary alliance was for the sake of the world. But on the other hand, this was also a great opportunity for the tribe to show off their muscles to the Night Elves. Everyone knew that if they killed a demigod, the Night Elves would definitely remember this grudge in their little black book. If the crisis of the world's destruction was resolved, then the territorial disputes around Grey Valley and the Barren Lands could be foreseen. But with Auro's arrival, the tribe's army had been devoured by 30% without even putting up a fight. How could Thrall not be angry? The Night Elves did not have it easy either. Whether it was the ultimate skill that the druids had prepared like Descent of the Tree World or Tyrants, Starfall, they both consumed a lot of magic power. They were definitely going to use it to fight the Burning Legion, but now it had been used up by a big bug. How could they not be angry? No wonder Tyrant had insisted that Duque make a promise and lead the alliance to hold the mountain for a little longer. Alright, Auro had to die. Even if he died a little slower, it would be a sin. With this in mind, everyone watched fervently as Auro fell, twitching in pain, struggling, and struggling. Wait. No. This guy, he's not dead yet. The gigantic worm that occupied almost everyone's field of vision did indeed look like it was twitching on the verge of death. Everyone tacitly did not surround it. Everyone knew that the struggle of a cornered beast was the most terrifying, and the dying prey was the prey that resisted the most fiercely. Soon, everyone realized that something was wrong. That's right, the meteor falling from the sky had pierced through Oro's body, and everyone could clearly see that even his spine had been completely broken. The life force of the arthropod boss, Oro, was beyond imagination. He was showing signs of self-healing. Countless tendon-like tentacles extended from the cross-section of his spine toward his head, attempting to reattach the broken spine that was still spewing yellow fluid. Every big shot of the Alliance, tribe, and night elves looked gloomy when they saw this. This was especially true for Tyrant, who was struggling internally. The night elves did have a trump card, but that was for dealing with Archimonde. If they used it here, they would have no trump card left for the Burning Legion's commander. As luck would have it, Oro seemed to have decided that Tyrant was the greatest threat to him. His 8 crab claws did not care about anything else as he forcefully dragged his slightly paralyzed lower body, making his 1,000-meter-long body charge straight for Tyrant at the top of the hill. High Priest, run! Tyrant's trusted aide Melland slapped the white tiger's rump. The white tiger immediately understood, and without waiting for Tyrant's orders, it immediately sprinted up the hill. Melland led more than 200 Moon Goddess Church sentinels in a counterattack against Oro, who was madly charging up the hill. Melland! No! Tyrant could not control herself as she was dragged away by the white tiger. She turned her head to look at her sisters who had followed her for more than 10,000 years. Although they were superior and subordinate, after 10,000 years together, they were already like sisters. Seeing that Melland and the others had chosen to die in order to protect her, Tyrant could not help but tear up uncontrollably. The arrows of the night elf archers and the attacks of the priestesses were not even enough to tickle such a huge bug boss. Only the giant trees summoned by the druids could cause Oro some trouble. In fact, Oro did not slow down at all. Instead, he continued to speed up. What shocked everyone even more was that Oro seemed to have reconnected his spine. At first, it was only the front 8 claws that could exert force, but now, even the middle claws were beginning to move. No one knew if the huge wound on Oro's chest would completely heal, but it was clear that this astonishing monster was beginning to regain its freedom. At this critical moment, the arcane light of Flash suddenly appeared near the hole on the back of Oro's head. Duque? Tyrant, Thrall, Wujin, and Grom, who had climbed up, were all shocked to see the highest commander of the Alliance standing on Oro's bumpy back. The next moment, 12 magicians' hands, the size of horse carriages surrounded Duque and began to fire magic missiles the size of water tanks at Oro's huge wound from Starfall. Puff! 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 The wound that was hit by the large arcane light balls began to spurt out large amounts of pus. Perhaps that was the acid in Oro's stomach. The yellow liquid splashed onto the hillside, instantly corroding large patches of green grass. A few druids who could not dodge in time were turned into a pool of pus and bones in the blink of an eye. They did not even have the time to scream. Everyone suddenly understood what Duque wanted to do. He was going to rush into Oro's body, which was like a sulfuric hell, with the body of a mortal, and find the opportunity to kill Oro. At some point, Jaina and Sylvanas arrived at the foot of the mountain. Seeing this, Jaina covered her mouth in horror, almost losing the ability to speak. Hundreds of meters away, Queen Sylvanas shouted, "Duque! Stop right there, you bastard!" As if he heard it, Duque tilted his head and smiled at Queen Sylvanas. "Sorry, it's too dirty here. Ladies are not allowed in." With that, Duque chose to step into the gates of hell. He activated all the barriers he could, his body burning with blazing flames, and rushed in. No! Sylvanas almost fainted. Duque would die if he did this. Chapter 929. Was he being reckless? Was he crazy? Perhaps it was. In many people's eyes, it was as if he had run into a grave and buried himself. This was simply courting death among courting death. The path of life was always filled with choices. No one knew what the consequences would be the moment they made a choice. Duque only knew that if he did not do it, no one else would, let alone do it better than him. Without the druids and tyrants' combined ultimate skill, if he wanted to kill Auro, he would have to break through the ultimate sandworm's defense, endure the damage from the sandstorm explosion, and earthquake, and painstakingly wear down the ultimate sandworm boss. It would be a nightmare. He had just let Arthas escape not long ago, and no matter what, Duque would not let another boss escape. Letting a tiger return to the mountain had always been a great taboo. Letting a boss escape was the greatest blasphemy to Duque, who was a follower of the church who fought bosses and stole equipment. Duque was going to risk it all. The Breaking Dawn magic circuits in his body were already operating to the limit. Before charging into Auro's huge body with his staff in his left hand and his sword in his right, Duque filled every inch of his body with magical elements. Even he himself knew that he was likely to die. How long had it been since he had to resurrect his corpse? It had been so long that Duque had almost forgotten that he still believed in the Church of Brother Spring. But then again, could he still resurrect? He suddenly smiled bitterly. Before Duke charged in, his angular face and the faintly discernible bitter smile on his lips made Queen Sylvanas and Jaina burst into tears at the same time. Yes. This job, if Duque did not do it, no one else could. Everyone thought that Duque would be the one to stand up in the end, and even treated it as a matter of course. But who really thought about Duque's feelings? The two queens were trembling in shock. They were not the only ones. Every pair of eyes that witnessed this scene were filled with shock. Tyrant, who was riding on the white tiger, stopped. Thrall, Watkin, and Grom, who were about to rush forward, stopped. Tens of thousands of mortals who were struggling, retreating, attacking, or trying to help Duque stopped. Every pair of eyes was watching as Duque's magic bombarded Auro's body. Yellow blood, flesh, and internal organs rained down on the grass. Then, Duque crashed into it. It was a completely dark world. After Starfall, the sky returned to daylight, and not a single ray of light could penetrate the murky pus and flesh to shine into Auro's body. Duque was completely following the system elf's instructions as he pushed forward through Auro's body, which was larger than most factories. The violent rain of arcane cannons blew up the muscles and organs in the way. The blazing flames scorched like the sun, destroying everything in its path. Every time he took a step, the tip of his toes would extend forward in front of him, preventing Duque's feet from sinking too deeply into the stomach acid and muscle tissue. The outer layer was filled with violent arcane spells, the middle layer was filled with flames, and the inner layer was filled with ice. The perfect control of a Breaking Dawn mage made the impossible possible. Duque was like the most incisive worker in the world, digging a path of victory that belonged only to him in the body of a giant sandworm called Auro. The pain stimulated Auro. No matter how slow he was, he knew that an uninvited guest had barged into his body, enough to kill him. If Duque had entered through his mouth full of sharp teeth, he had a million ways to kill Duque. However, Duque had bypassed his mouth and entered through the back of the oral cavity, outside of the esophagus. He was at his wit's end, and could only twist his body in an attempt to prevent Duque from gaining a foothold. A giant sandworm over 1,000 meters in length could easily rise and fall more than 200 meters when it kept twisting and turning. For a mere human, it was 1,000 times, 10,000 times more violent than riding a roller coaster. There was almost no air inside, and Duque relied entirely on his wind and lightning powers to condense a ball of air to ensure that he could breathe. Under such violent tosses and falls, Duque had no choice but to expend even more mana, using Mega's hand and other spells to stabilize his body and continue moving forward. Oro's final struggle destroyed almost everything around him: the orc buildings he passed, the trees on the mountain, the grass. Even the rather sturdy rocks of Mount Hyjal were crushed into powder by Oro's frenzied struggle. Will Duque succeed? Jaina was extremely nervous, her right hand subconsciously gripping Sylvana's left hand. Queen Sylvana's slender fingers and Jaina's as soft as spring onions clasped together, and they could feel the nervousness in each other's hearts. I don't know. Queen Sylvanas wanted to answer, but when the words came to her mouth, they became, he will definitely succeed. Because he is Duke Marcus. The greatest hero in the world. Because he is Duke Marcus. This sentence seemed to have become some kind of totem symbol, a faith filled with mysterious power. Jaina's heart, which was so nervous that it almost jumped out of her chest, seemed to have magically begun to calm down because of this sentence. Regardless of race, everyone was looking forward to it. Waiting for the final result. According to the system elf's calculations, it was only 100 meters from Oro's wound to Oro's heart. But it was this 100 meters that made Duque feel as if he had walked a 25,000-mile-long march. Under Oro's frenzied twisting, even if Duque kept using the long icicles to stabilize his body, he still could not avoid being left behind. Moreover, the internal structure of Oro's body was completely different from what he had imagined. His stomach, which was filled with acid, was simply too big, and Duque had to choose to take a detour, passing through the stomach and the outer layer of the abdominal cavity. What was more terrifying was that Duque would occasionally encounter attacks from tissues similar to the human white blood cells that fought against external invasions. This consumed even more of Duque's mana. But, nearer. 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 Even if he took 5 steps forward and took 3 steps back, even if he took 10 steps forward and took 9 steps back, even if his progress was as slow as a snail, Duque was still nearing his target. Even without the system elf's guidance, Duque could hear the intense heartbeat coming from Oro's internal organs and muscles. Die! Monster, Duque roared, gathering all the mana in his magic circuit, and through the layers of internal organs, he shot a gigantic, frostfire arrow, at the target. Chapter 930. Oro's massive body was able to affect everyone's hearts with every move he made. His madness. His spasms. Every building that it destroyed and every tree that it crushed was enough to make people tremble in fear. What everyone was most concerned about was, of course, Duque, who had entered Oro's body. It had nothing to do with race or faction. It was purely about Duque's success and the future of the entire world. This was the chain reaction of the ultimate move. If the Night Elves were forced to use their ultimate move here, then no matter how they struggled, they would not be able to escape the Burning Legion's clutches, and the world would be doomed. Just as everyone's heart rate reached its peak, Oro's mountainous body suddenly froze, and his fang-filled mouth opened wide. He seemed to want to roar, and let out the last howl of his life. But, he couldn't do it. His blood-filled mouth opened wide, and then his neck tilted, and his head, which was as huge as a fortress, fell to the top of the hill. Dead? Dead. Really dead, hooray. Regardless of race or camp, every mortal who was watching this scene cheered in ecstasy in their own language. Long live Lord Duke Marcus. The loudest cheers were naturally from the Alliance. At this moment, many of the Night Elves, who had isolated themselves for tens of thousands of years, heard of Duque's name for the first time. But that didn't stop them from giving their warmest applause to the human hero who had saved their high priest's life. Only the tribe's orcs were conflicted. What the hell was going on? 13 years ago, it was Duque who led the Alliance to single-handedly destroy the tribe's dream of conquering the world of Azeroth. It was also this man, who was more demonic than a demon, who single-handedly led the tragedy of sending hundreds of thousands of elite orcs into the sea to feed the fishes. But it was also this man who, in the face of a common enemy, did his best to save the tribe's warriors at the foot of the hill, and killed this seemingly undefeatable giant insect. The trolls and taurens were also very straightforward races. They had wanted to cheer and applaud, but the orcs were all silent, and they didn't know what to do. On the contrary, the first orc applauded. Looking for the applause, the orcs were shocked to find that the one applauding was their great chief, Sal. Sal shouted loudly, "Clap! Why aren't you clapping? In the face of a common enemy, whether or not he is our former foe. A hero who has performed such a heroic act deserves applause, doesn't he? Let us praise Duke Marcus. That's right. Heroes know no boundaries. Even if they were each other's heroes and each other's enemies, at this moment, he was still a common hero." Sal's magnanimity immediately received loud cheers from the orcs, trolls, and taurens. They were praising Duke's feat, but they were also praising Sal's magnanimity. Every warrior's face was flushed with excitement. Because only someone with such boldness and bearing is qualified to be our great chieftain. At this moment, something unexpected happened. "Duque! Damn it! Are you dead? If you're not dead, make a sound." At some point, Servanas and Jaina were standing on Auro's huge body, looking as if they did not know where to start. At this moment, everyone was shocked to find that the hero who had finally killed Auro, Duque, had not come out yet. Sal's expression changed. He immediately slapped his forehead, picked up his hammer, and rushed toward Auro. If this was before the appearance of the Burning Legion, Sal would of course want nothing more than for Duque to die, the sooner the better. But the situation was different now. They were about to rely on the Alliance to carry the burden, and if Duque died now, the Alliance's camp could easily collapse. All of a sudden, the motionless Auro's body seemed to twitch. About 300 meters from his head, a small bump appeared on the left side of the worm's body, and then it quickly recovered. This movement was so small that even Jaina did not notice it. Servanas sensed it and shouted, "Duque is there. He's not dead yet. Quickly open an opening." "Open?" Easier said than done. Strictly speaking, Auro, this giant sandworm, was a demigod monster. With the enhancements from the leader template, his defense was insanely high. Ordinary attacks could not hurt him at all. Didn't you see how none of the druids had succeeded in activating the giant wood stab? Jaina chanted an incantation, conjuring a giant ice sword and thrusting it forward. However, with a fakacha, the seemingly sharp ice sword sank 3 meters deep into Auro's soft abdomen, but it did not manage to pierce through that thick layer of skin at all. Even Jaina could not do it, let alone Queen Sylvanas. The weakness of a ranger's low attack power was magnified at this moment. Queen Sylvanas and Jaina were so anxious that they were about to cry. Even Tyrant, who had rushed over on her tiger, could not do anything. At this moment, a sudden roar came from the sky. "Out of the way!" The girls looked up and saw a valiant figure rushing into the sky. He leaped high and then chopped down with the momentum of a comet. That crimson light was naturally Blood Roar. To be able to perform such a powerful jump slash, it had to be Grom Hellroar, the one who could teach the Lord of the Abyss, Manaroth, a lesson with his axe no matter how many times he had reincarnated. For a moment, Jaina thought that this terrifying orc was going to hit them while they were down. However, Queen Sylvanas reacted quickly and pulled Jaina away. Even so, the two girls were afraid that when Grom's axe cleaved through Auro, it would also cleave through Duque. Pfft! With Hellroar's strength, it would not have been easy to break through Auro's defense. After all, this part of his body would usually be hidden underground. Firstly, Auro was already dead. Secondly, he was basically lying down and waiting to be slaughtered, so the power of Grom's axe was naturally raised to the limit. The axe actually made a cut that was even more exquisite than a scalpel's. Auro's white abdomen was cut open nearly 20 meters long, and muddy yellow blood and pus splattered out. Tyrant frowned and waved her hand. Elun's divine guardian. Immediately, a layer of gentle milky white light appeared on everyone's bodies. Obviously, this was to prevent the corrosive nature of Auro's blood. It seemed like the blood in Auro's abdomen was not that acidic, but it was still smelly. Queen Sylvanas and Jaina almost covered their noses as they watched Sar and the Minotaur chief Cairn Bloodhoof rush forward and tear at the wound even more. After the toughest outer layer was torn open, the rest was simple. Grom rushed forward and hacked at Duque's ice barrier, in 3 to 5 strikes. Chapter 931. Duque, who had been dragged out by everyone, had a funny expression on his face. It was a strange expression that said, "There's always an unruly person who wants to harm me." For a moment, Grom almost wanted to break the ice and chop Duque's head. Fortunately, activating the ice barrier did not mean that Duque lost his perception of the outside world. On the contrary, Duque's senses were even sharper. Opening the fridge in advance was just a precaution. If Hellscream was so weak that his hand trembled and killed Duque, Duque would definitely think of a way to send the supposedly dead Grom back to hell to play in the mud after reviving. However, Duque had gone all out this time. The magic circuit was empty. If his magic circuit was usually a huge reservoir, then it was now a small pond where the bottom could be seen. Although the Breaking Dawn magic circuit could continuously generate magic power for Duque, he had used too much just now. Even if the internal organs of a demigod monster were as strong as demigods, it was really difficult to break through. After Duque deactivated the ice barrier, his legs suddenly turned to jelly, and he fell forward. It didn't matter if he fell, but he still had his 2 confidants by his side. Even if Gianna was unwilling, at least my baby Sylvanas was here. That was what Duque thought. Yes, the plan worked. So, Duque fell with relief. In fact, Queen Sylvanas had indeed stretched out her hand at lightning speed to help Duque. However, the stench coming from Duque's body easily repelled Queen Sylvanas. She retracted her hand as if she had been electrocuted. In less than a second, Duque was about to fall miserably into the mud. At that moment, the tribe's elder was dumbfounded. They were not even professional at saving people, let alone something as weak as helping someone up. Not to mention, weren't those 2 women extremely nervous just now? No one realized that most beautiful women were actually misophobic. The more beautiful a girl was, the more they paid attention to their appearance. Were there sloppy beauties in this world? Yes. It must be a magical existence that looked like a beautiful woman, a beautiful tomboy. And so, without a care for anyone, Duque fell straight and miserably into the abyss of mud. Until the moment before he fell, Duque still raised his head and showed a sad expression to the 2 queens. Fortunately, in the end, Queen Sylvie put on an expression that said, "Since you've already ruined me, I might as well let you ruin me once and for all," while she reached out to hold Duque's right arm. His left arm was in Proudmoore's hand. At this moment, even a fool would know that the 2 queens had a close relationship with Duque. Jaina immediately summoned a water elemental and swallowed Duque's large body into it. Only his head was left outside so that she could clean Duque's body. Under Jaina's superb control, Duque felt like he was soaking in a hot spring jacuzzi. After being treated like an emperor, Duque finally felt comfortable. He suppressed the urge to divorce Queen Sylvie. Duque sighed. "Grom, it's your turn to save my life. We're even now." Lord Howl's mouth twitched. "That counts?" "That doesn't count." Duque bared his teeth. "Fine, I'll count it as half a life." Grom didn't say anything else in the end. His silence indicated his agreement. Duque turned to Thrall. "Please order a speedy retreat. Even the seriously injured must be treated immediately and moved to the camp halfway up the mountain for treatment." "So soon?" Thrall was stunned. Thrall's original plan was for the tribe to immediately reorganize the defense line. They would stand up where they fell. Retreating without a fight was not the tribe's style. Duque looked at the mountains to the south. I'm afraid that the cave that the giant sandworm called Oro came out of will be used. Used? Then, could he make use of it? Thrall frowned slightly, then proposed this idea, as well as his wish for the orcs in good condition to join the defense line on the mountainside. He also expressed his determination to obey orders. It was obvious that Duque's repeated acts of generosity had influenced the entire tribe. All right, I might have to be depressed for a while. I'll leave the rest to you and Turayan to discuss. Remember, it's best that we hold on for more than 3 days. It won't be good for either side to lose too much, so please make sure to rotate. Understood. Thrall nodded heavily. History had changed greatly. Originally, it should have been the camp at the foot of the mountain and the camp on the mountainside that would each take on the Burning Legion for 2 rounds. Now, it was obvious that the Alliance camp on the mountainside would take on 4 rounds. When they arrived at the camp on the mountainside, the tribe was dumbfounded by the exaggerated fortress in front of them. It was infuriating to compare oneself to others. When comparing goods, they had to throw them away. Everyone had entered Mount Hyjal at the same time, and the tribe had the geographical advantage. They didn't even need to transport things up the mountain. At that time, when they saw the Alliance's large steam trucks carrying bags of the legendary city-building artifact, cement, up the mountain, the young orcs, including Thrall, were full of curiosity. When the Alliance mixed cement and steel to form this towering concrete city standing in front of them, Thrall finally understood why his predecessors had suffered such heavy losses after crashing into the humans' military fortifications. There were a total of 7 walls built against the mountain, and each wall could accommodate a carriage. This was not a wall built with bricks and stones. The 7th wall, which had not yet been fully formed, clearly told the tribe that the wall was built with a huge steel net as the base, and a huge template was covered on the outside. Then, in the gap between the 2 layers of template, the magical slurry of cement was poured. Each wall was also divided into 2 layers of outer walls and the thickest inner wall. The outermost layer was also a reinforced concrete structure, purely to resist physical attacks. The middle layer could not be seen. But this could ensure that the damage and collapse of the outer wall would not affect the structure of the inner wall, which in turn would affect its load-bearing capacity. The outermost 3 layers of the wall had been completed, and the orcs could also see that on the middle 3 layers of the wall, the mages, who were suspended in the air by baskets, were engraving magic runes on the middle layer of the wall to strengthen its ability to resist dark magic. Thrall and the others were completely shocked. The camp at the foot of the mountain that they had painstakingly built felt inferior to even a human town. In his heart, Thrall was even more determined that he could not say it out loud. After Thrall and Turayan discussed cooperation, the distribution of supplies and other issues, Duque was taken to the most heavily guarded room in the fortress to recuperate. Rest well, we have something to do, so we'll leave first. Queen Sylvie and Jaina were also busy people, and they were about to prepare for war. Duque suddenly said, "Wait." Chapter 932. What's wrong? The 2 queens were stunned at the same time. This time, because they were worried that Duque would be injured, the 2 queens put in a lot of effort. Jaina brought Aegwin out to check on Duque's injuries, and Queen Ciri directly let Riadaline come to Duque's side as a guard. Plus, Vanessa, who had been guarding Duque, was quite skilled, so it could be said to be foolproof. They didn't know why Duque suddenly stopped them. Duque smiled mysteriously. Beating down a strong enemy, wouldn't it be too much of a killjoy if there weren't even spoils of war? With that, Duque raised his hand, and a lot of equipment that had obviously been preliminarily cleaned fell out of his spatial bag. Duque clapped his hands. Come, call Ronan and Lillis, too. After a while, everyone was present. Everyone was a knowledgeable person. No one would have thought that Dooku would be able to get so many good things after killing that super big insect. Sensing the mysterious magic power that was emanating from the equipment, everyone knew that this was ancient magic equipment that far surpassed the modern world. It was likely that it even dated back to the ancient Darkness Empire. Most women were misophobic, especially women of status like Jaina and Servanas, who couldn't possibly use these strange-looking large pieces of equipment. But others could use them. This time, everyone came all the way to Kalimdor to support us. Although it's for the greater good, everyone is risking their lives to fight. On one hand, it's to reward everyone, and on the other hand, it's to increase everyone's combat power. So, if you get the equipment, please don't refuse. After some introductory remarks, Dooku fought the tycoons and divided the land. Oh, he killed the boss and divided the equipment. Riataline, this insect scale blocker, is yours. The Blood Elf Knight stepped forward respectfully and took the green shield that seemed to be made of several beetle shells connected together, looking very much like a comma. At first, she thought it was strange, but when she successfully connected her magic circuit to the shield, a look of pleasant surprise appeared on her face. "Thank you, Lord Commander." Riataline immediately bowed as far as her armor could bend. Although Holy Knights practiced Holy Light was also a type of magic power. They also needed to practice the Holy Light circuit, which was similar to the magic circuit. Due to the special characteristics of the class, the Holy Knight's Holy Light regeneration was actually lower than that of the priest and mage. This shield was commonly known as the Milk Shield. It was a shield that increased intelligence and spirit for paladins. Among the paladins, there were Mograine, Sidan, Turalian, and others who were strong enough to tank at the front lines. For a balanced paladin like Riataline, Dooku could only sneak her into the healer team. The adorable Riataline still doesn't know. She's still rejoicing over the fact that this shield has armor that far surpasses her previous shield of excellent quality. Was he still helping Dooku count his money after being sold? "Lilith, this pair of leather, digger's boots, is for you." Lilith tilted her head and faintly thanked him. She didn't hide anything and directly tried them on. She was surprised to find that they actually fit. The magical feeling of being connected by blood made this expressionless man reveal an expression of pleasant surprise. "Ronan, this, digger's wrist guard, is for you." Ronan respectfully took it and put it on, feeling even more grateful in his heart. In this day and age, epic equipment was not easy to find. Although Teacher Dooku made him work hard, he would always give him a share when it was time to reward him. Ronan bowed deeply. "Thank you, teacher." Dooku casually handed over a bug, which shocked Ronan. Ronan took a closer look and realized that it was actually a gun with the shape of a strange bug. From afar, it looked like a crab pincer. "Give this to Sir Lang Bronzebeard for me. I remember that he needs a good gun." "Understood, teacher." Finally, Dooku glanced at the two queens and sighed. "Jaina, I know that you've been secretly envious of Senior Ronan's unruly will, for so many years." At this point, Jaina stuck out her tongue like a little girl. After so many years, if she could still be fooled by Dooku, how could she not know that unruly will was better than the smoke glove after becoming a radiant moon wizard? It was impossible to say that she didn't secretly complain. Of course, she couldn't help but curse Dooku in secret. Dooku handed over an exquisitely made box with golden edges and a dark yellow background. It was only half the size of a palm. It was a magic accessory. "I've already appraised this. It's called sandworm poison. Don't worry, it's just a name. It's harmless. Its usage is similar to Ronan's. It's just a little lacking." Teacher Dooku acted like a teacher, his face full of "look. I actually love you too" expression. Jaina was displeased. Humph. Teacher Duque, if you really love me so much, you should give me a better one. Duque's face fell. Damn it, you must have skipped countless versions to get rid of Deathwing and loot his corpse. If you send a few more bosses that should only appear 10 or 20 years later, how many of my old bones will be left? Duque immediately turned hostile. If you want it, then take it. If not, then forget it. I want it. Why not? Jaina moved like lightning, snatching the sandworm poison, and holding it in her hands, as if she was afraid that it would melt. Finally, there was only Queen Sylvanas left. The arrogant Sylvanas stood with her hands on her hips in an S shape, a faint smile on her lips as she looked at Duque. She was clearly saying that he didn't have anything good to give her, just wait and see. Duque's eyes widened. Who almost threw me to the ground and ate sh*t. Sylvanas retreated in a rare moment, not daring to look at Duque. She turned her head away with a red face. Yes, I know I was wrong. Please let me go, we'll talk about it later. Fine. It's a deal. Duque's feigned anger turned into a sinister smile as he looked at Sylvanas gently. He raised a small, intricately crafted, gem-studded green carapace. Sylvanas, this cave dweller shell is for you. With it, once you activate it, it'll be like having a magic shield out of thin air. It's about the same as a radiant moon mage's ice shield. Sylvanas was overjoyed when she heard this. What was the saddest thing about rangers? They didn't have enough life-saving skills. Especially against unreasonable AoE attacks, they could only take it with their bodies in despair. Now that she had the cave dweller shell, it was tantamount to having half a life. In her joy, Sylvanas actually did something that shocked everyone around her. In her passion, she actually rushed over to hold the weak Duque's face and kissed him deeply. Wow, there was an uproar. Chapter 933. Legend had it that Duque had a special liking for the High Elves. 13 years ago, he had taken the eldest and third sisters of the Windrunner sisters in one go, which was considered a legend in the Alliance. There were also rumors that his relationship with Queen Sylvanas wasn't shallow. Some people even said that the reason this second sister of the Windwalker family was able to become queen was because of Duke's help. But no one knew that Duque was so crazy, enviable, that he had taken all the three Windrunner sisters, including Queen Sin Dorii. Suspicion aside, all the blood elves present were dumbfounded. Second sister, you. Lilissa's brain crashed. She had never thought that her three brothers-in-law were all that ****starred Duque. Riataline was even more confused. Wasn't there a rumor that Duque had something going on with Her Majesty Kalia, Queen of Lordaeron? Although she had heard that he had an ambiguous relationship with His Majesty Proudmoore, this was the first time she had heard about his relationship with her queen. It seemed that when she faced Duque in the future, she would have to treat him as the queen's husband. Next to them, Jaina was very jealous. There was a strange feeling in her mouth, and she looked at the two of them with complicated eyes. After a full 10 seconds, Queen Sylvanas let go of Duque, who was a little stunned. Yo, I'm still willing to kiss you even though you're so smelly. We really do love each other. Duque was embarrassed. Only then did he remember that the smell on him had not completely faded. As if to announce to the world that Duque was her possession, Queen Sylvanas playfully patted Duque's face. Okay, we all know that you've overdrawn your magic circuit just now. Have a good rest. If you really can't take it anymore, someone will come to you. With that, Queen Sylvanas tilted her head. Vanessa, please clean this guy up. I don't want him to still be so smelly the next time I see him. As you wish, Duchess. Vanessa looked respectful, but in fact, she did not hesitate to push Queen Sylvanas. She was clearly saying, I don't recognize any queen. Only the true matriarch of the Marcus family can order me around. You can be a duchess or get out of here. Queen She was in high spirits. There was no hostility. Instead, there was a faint admiration. Good, not bad. Only a maid like you can protect and take care of my man. I'll leave it to you. Yes. Vanessa replied with impeccable etiquette. Everyone dispersed like the tide, leaving only Duque and Vanessa. Duque said, Vanessa, give me a moment. I need to take a shower. Stop joking. His Majesty Proudmoore already told me that you used up almost all of your mana just now. You had to use a small amount of magic to force your body to move even a finger. It won't be good for your body if you keep pretending. Ugh. When the truth of the matter was suddenly exposed, Duque was embarrassed. But could it be that Vanessa wanted to help him bathe? Oh, no, such a beast, oh, welfare thing, how could it happen to me? If you don't see, you wouldn't know that the little maid who didn't have a great figure back then was already, cough cough. Duque, who had accidentally lost his moral integrity, was obviously thinking too much. Don't worry. This is to prevent you, a bestial duke, from going berserk all of a sudden when you're injured and doing something inappropriate to violate your cute little maidservant. Vanessa said with a straight face as she shook a golden bell in her hand. Ding dang dang. There was a loud noise, and 4 beautiful but strong maids rushed in from outside the door. Damn it, just by looking at the calluses on their hands, it was obvious that these so-called maids were all female knights, swordsmen, and so on. They had obviously received orders from many generals or queens, and immediately took off Duque's smelly robe and clothes without a word. They then pressed Duque into a large bucket filled with warm water, and scrubbed Duque like they were scrubbing a dungeon. Help! Help! The miserable Duque could only see Vanessa laughing sinisterly at the side. Are you *King's spy or my maidservant? After much difficulty, Duque was like a broken puppet, lying on the clean bed in a very uncoordinated position. Destroying Auro's heart and escaping had indeed exhausted Duque's magic. Before his magic could circulate normally, Duque did not dare to release his senses too much. After all, long-distance elemental perception required magic as well. What's the situation outside? Vanessa looked like a loyal and obedient maid as she replied in a dignified manner, just as you expected, master. The camp at the foot of the mountain is under special attack. The Night Elves Sentinels and the Blood Elves Rangers are delaying the undead army, but they will soon engage the defenders on the mountainside. A vein in the shape of a cross appeared on Duque's forehead. Can you stand closer to talk? You're obviously looking down on me. Hee. Master, you're thinking too much. Vanessa covered her mouth and snickered. How could I look down on you? I'm your most loyal maid. Even after you abandoned me silently for 10 years, I've never lowered my loyalty to you even though I've been protecting your rumored girlfriend, Her Majesty Menethil. Damn it! Aren't you being sarcastic? Do you dare to swear on your integrity that you're not resentful? What are you doing standing 10 meters away, pinching your nose and speaking to me in a soft voice? You're even standing at the door, looking like you're going to run away at any moment. Damn it! If I really was a great noble of this era, you would have been killed 100 times over, and then killed 100 times over, all right? Why are all the maids so gentle and sweet, willing to be the life mentors of noble young masters, while I'm just a maid, and I'm so worrisome? Duque felt like he was in a trance. All right. Get out. Since you want me to rest, I'll have a good sleep. Duque sent Vanessa away in a bad mood. Duque was exhausted. Fighting Auro head-on at this point in time was definitely a heavy burden to bear. He fell into a deep sleep, but before he entered the dream, he unintentionally spread out his senses and heard Vanessa's words. Lord Ronan, although Mount Hyjal is indeed important, I've always believed that my master is the last hope of this world. If the defensive line is in danger, please open the teleportation door to send my master away. If Stormwind City isn't safe, reopening the door of darkness and sending my master to Draenor is better than letting him die here. Vanessa's voice was sonorous and powerful, and her words had an unquestionable majesty. I understand. Everything is for Master's safety. This was Ronan's humble voice. Duque sighed in a daze. All right, that's my good maid. Chapter 934. The Burning Legion is here. With an astonishing momentum that was like raging waves that could split a ravine. Even the most imaginative allied army warriors would never have thought that the Burning Legion's first wave of attack would be like this. Without the druids' urging, the giant trees surrounding the camp at the foot of the mountain withered rapidly. Although the giant trees that once required a few people to wrap their arms around them didn't scatter upon contact like withered tree bark, it was obvious that they had lost their strong vitality. Originally, the orcs wanted to cut down the wood and place it in front of the camp's first line of defense to serve as antlers or build arrow towers. Under Duque's insistence, all the orcs had retreated to the camp on the mountainside of Mount Hyjal. Only 2,000 elves were left to monitor and delay the enemy near the two peaks. Suddenly, there was a loud rumbling sound from underground. It was the sound of a huge tide rolling and running. Every night elf and blood elf looked at each other. No one knew what was going to happen. But to be on the safe side, Tyron's deputy, Melander, and Lillis, the commander of the frontline blood elf rangers, ordered their men to climb over the top of the mountain and hide behind it. They left a dozen people behind to monitor the situation. As expected, the enemy appeared 3 minutes later. It was a spectacular super fountain. Wrapped in indescribable black liquid, tens of thousands of undying were sprayed into the sky from underground, scattering in all directions along with the black liquid. The tribe's camp, which was already in ruins, was once again ravaged. The immortals, big and small, were sprayed into the sky and fell down again under the acceleration of gravity, falling everywhere with banging noises. The smallest were zombies that only had half of their bodies left. The bigger ones were ghouls, and the biggest ones were abominations that weighed several tons. These monsters that had long lost their lives and had almost no intelligence to speak of were already attacking the surrounding buildings before they could even get up. In front of the elves and the few troll scouts was a frenzied undead army. They used their broken teeth to bite the wooden arrow towers, used their rusty machetes to hack at the half-broken mud walls made by the orcs, and used their huge arms to smash at the camp's wooden walls. The black fountain continued to gush out, spraying more and more undead army into the abandoned campsite. Suddenly, a black cloud floated over from afar. It was thousands of gargoyles, as well as many huge, white skeletons and death ice dragons that were surrounded by a freezing aura. Dust rose from the ground. It was a mixed army of undead and evil demons, numbering in the hundreds of thousands. At this moment, Thrall, Wujin, and the other horde leaders who had retreated to the mountainside all looked grim. If it wasn't for Duke repeatedly reminding them to retreat, if they really continued to defend at the foot of the mountain, they would probably be wiped out. There were zombies constantly breaking through the center, tens of thousands of enemy flying units above them, and a large army pressing on the border. It was estimated that the remaining 20 to 30,000 elites of their tribe would all die here. Thrall hurriedly summoned a night elf priestess who was in charge of communication. He pointed at the live broadcast in the magic mirror. What if the Mount Hyjal defense line continues to be breached by the big bugs? The priestess puffed out her chest and spoke in the common human language that wasn't very fluent. Don't be afraid. Mount Hyjal is a sacred mountain that has been blessed by the night elves' magic for 10,000 years. The mountain itself is extremely difficult to penetrate. If there are no more big bugs of the same level as before, we don't have to worry about attacks from underground. What if there are more? Thrall emphasized. The night elves shook their heads. According to the Alliance commander Marcus, there is only one big bug called Auro, even among the 4 ancient gods of Azeroth. What if the enemy's air force flies directly to the top of the mountain? The priestess was very sure. The sacred mountain has a powerful anti-air magic array. Everything more than 300 yards above the ground will be attacked by Breaking Dawn mages at all times. Even a demigod can't withstand such an attack. And after going up the mountain, except for the main passage, everywhere is a dead zone. Thrall finally felt a little relieved. In this way, they only had to defend the front. At this moment, Thrall saw the elves in front begin to retreat. Because of the terrain, the undead army looked very fierce, but they were always a distance away from the elves. The area within 200 meters of the elven army was an absolute dead zone. The elves nimbly ran between the mountains and the woodlands, occasionally turning around gracefully to shoot an arrow, blowing up the heads of the zombies or ghouls charging at the front. The elves fought and retreated. Arrows rained down, but they still couldn't stop the tide of zombies that numbered in the tens of thousands. It's here. Thrall raised the hammer of destruction in his hand. Prepare for battle. After coordination, the Alliance gave up the first and second city walls on the mountainside and left them to the tribe to guard. Thrall's shout caused the entire valley to reverberate with the unique battle cry of the tribe. Loktar. Not long ago, they had lost their campsite for no reason, so the orc warriors' chests were filled with anger. They raised their steel axes and hammers that had been baptized with holy water high up in the air and let out roars filled with fighting spirit. At this time, the black tide was very close. Cover fire. Number 1 shooting unit, fire. Behind the first city wall, there were 100 dwarven mortar squads. The thick and round cannons immediately let out a deafening roar. Bang bang bang. In any case, it was difficult for the orcs to adapt to the somewhat dull sound coming from behind them, and some orcs even subconsciously shrank their heads. But the elite dwarven gunners were not just for show. The mortar shell flew into the air and drew a beautiful arc. Then, it followed the downward slope of the mountain and flew to a faraway place. It happened to be 200 meters behind the elves. Boom boom boom. The small caliber mortar shells were enough to blow up the zombies and ghouls with weaker defenses. The dwarves' cover was so accurate that Thrall breathed a sigh of relief. Even Wajin, who was ready to let the troll throw spears as cover, quietly put down his hands. It was ironic to think about it. Although they were of the same race, the elves and the trolls had been fighting for tens of thousands of years. When did they ever try to cover each other like this? When the last elven ranger rushed into the city gate at high speed, the 12 ox-head warriors could not wait for the winch to slowly pull up the moat. They directly pulled the thick chains with brute force and pulled up the suspension bridge. Looking at the 7 huge horizontal gullies with a depth of more than 8 meters in front of the city wall, blocking the entire mountain road, Thrall's scalp was numb. These were the masterpieces of the dwarves' steam bulldozers. Fortunately, they bumped into the zombies that did not know what fear was. From another perspective, if he were to use the orc army to attack here, how many lives would it take to fill these gullies? Chapter 935. The tide of the undead army was too terrifying. The mortars bombarded the horde of zombies, and every shell blasted dozens of zombies into smithereens. They either died with their heads smashed, or their bodies mutilated and lost the ability to move. The zombies that didn't have much sanity left stretched out their arms and sprinted up the mountain. Some zombies were pushed to the ground by the zombies behind them because of missing legs and other reasons. Even so, they still waved their rotten limbs, crawled like dogs, and used both hands and feet to madly rush up the mountain. If the zombies in front were too slow, the zombies behind them would roll over their companions and continue their charge. At this moment, Bulang Bronzebeard, who was behind the third city wall, was playing with his new gift, the weird-looking gun in the shape of a bug. He glanced at the zombies impatiently. Param golden hammer. Yes, sir. A dwarf officer holding a huge hammer and wearing rare golden armor responded on the spot. Fixed target. Number 1, shoot at the source. 3 sets of small steel cannons cover the area. Don't slack off, even if we're covering for those damn orcs. But, from another perspective, we're letting them remember the battle at Blackrock Mountain. Bulang's evil smile quickly spread among the dwarves. Hee hee. Hee 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 hee. 15 years was like a generation for humans. But for the dwarves, who had an average lifespan of 800 years, 15 years felt like a month for humans. Every dwarf warrior could still remember the humiliation of being blocked by the Blood Ring tribe at their front door, and not being able to enter their own garden. They didn't have the romance of hunting with guns, and they didn't have the spare time to collect the treasures from the mines. The dwarves were very unhappy about working with the Horde. The orcs were once slaves of the Alliance, and now they had no place to stay. They could only run across the ocean like stray dogs. Why do we have to work with those damned green-skinned dwarves? The dwarves didn't understand. If the order wasn't given by Commander Duque, who had always supported the Bronzebeard dwarves during their most difficult times and had never lacked food and medicine, the dwarves would have used guns filled with gunpowder but without bullets to shoot that fellow. Why are the faces of the Black Iron dwarves black? Ever since we sprayed his face with our muskets, it has turned black. This was a clumsy dwarf-style joke, but it also reflected that if one didn't have some achievements in the Alliance, it would be impossible to control this group of irascible dwarves. Alright, Bulang had chosen the small steel cannon that had beaten the Horde into dogs back in the Scorching Canyon. The small steel cannons that shone brilliantly in that battle were, in fact, many more were built later on. Who knew that after the battle at Scorching Canyon, he would no longer have a use for it? At one time, the watchtower in the blasted land had 36 small steel cannons at most. Later, as the times changed, the small cannon was replaced by the more powerful Little Duque cannon. The dwarves never lacked iron ore, and it was quite troublesome to recycle these finished products. As a result, all those small steel cannons could only be placed in the warehouse to play games with the dust. Duque had instructed the dwarves to bring the small steel cannons in this rare battle across the sea. He even said that they would respond to tactics and abandon the cannons at any time. Since it was an outdated piece of trash, Bulang was naturally happy to obey. Who would have thought that it could be used to scare the orcs? As expected, when the large cannons boomed from the third wall, many of the older orc warriors were almost scared to death. This was a nightmare that had traversed 13 years in time. Every old orc who had been captured in the Scorching Canyon remembered the humiliation of being forced to surrender by the terrifying firepower of the dwarves, those bastards. Varrock and Brock, the 2 veterans who had experienced the first and second battle of the Dark Portal, were instantly enraged when they heard the dwarves' wild laughter that seemed to have been deliberately suppressed. Sar had just rejoiced at the support of the dwarves' cannons when he noticed that many of the incomparably heroic old orc warriors were behaving unnaturally. What's wrong? Sigh. In the end, it was Grom, who had experienced the war but not the last battle of the Scorching Canyon, who told Sar the story. What? Are you sure that this is the small steel cannon that destroyed the last orc army? Sar fell silent. Although the relationship between the Alliance and the Horde had shown signs of warming up recently, the damage done to each other in the past was too deep. The Horde had slaughtered many humans, dwarves, and high elves. The Alliance had also destroyed the Troll Empire and enslaved the orcs. This was already a bad debt. Pass down the order. Our enemy is only the living in front of us. Don't be distracted by the small details. We will prove the glory of the Horde with merit. When the Horde warriors calmed down, they found that the dwarves' cannons were still very powerful. Under the sunlight, many huge black cannonballs fell from the sky. They landed accurately on the seemingly wide mountain path that was hundreds of meters wide, sputtering out with sparks that ignited pieces of the ground. They screamed over the two huge walls, creating a hellish scene in front of the orcs. Sal suddenly understood why the incomparably brave orc seniors in his heart had broken down and become captives. This was not a destructive weapon that mortals could resist with their bodies. Without becoming a professional, there was no chance of survival in the face of this level of attack. Logically speaking, in the face of this kind of attack that could wipe out everything within a 100-meter radius, there shouldn't be any existence that could survive. But Sar found that he was wrong. A large number of abominations, stitched together with countless corpses, actually passed through the line of destruction and rushed to the bottom of the city wall under the seemingly destructive cannon fire. After all, it was a blind spot that the cannons could not reach. Attack! Wajin's command sounded. Behind the widened shooting holes, the trolls stretched out their long arms and threw their steel spears at Wajin. These terrifying spears that could kill a Tauren with one spear could not stop the movement of the abominations for even a second. These monsters whose faces were shot through, regardless of whether the eyeballs on their heads were still there or not, were playing with human ladders under the city wall. They used their flesh and blood to build a sloping passage that could climb over the 15-meter-high wall. The dead should rest in peace. Sar waved the hammer of destruction in his hand angrily. Chapter 936. With a roar, the huge black square-headed hammer in Sal's hand emitted a blazing light like a small sun. A huge abomination that pounced toward Sal with its arms wide open was hit in the head on the spot. The abomination had the appearance of a big fatty, and its waist circumference was at least 5 to 6 meters. Under this hammer strike, the stitches on its body directly burst open, and the flesh that was forcefully stitched together emitted scorching sparks. In the next moment, its huge body was torn apart on the spot. Sal originally thought that he was already quite violent, but he was suddenly frightened by a loud roar that sounded in his ears. It was Cain Bloodhoof. This burly Tauren chief, who was a size larger than Sal, was at his youngest and strongest age. A gigantic totem pole that could be used as the main pillar of the Beastmen barracks swept across, and two abominations that pounced at him were cut in half at the waist. He picked up the lower body of an abomination and threw it out effortlessly, like a bowling ball or a cannonball. The dozens of abominations that were swarming towards him were instantly knocked down. Even Grom, who had chopped an abomination to death with an axe, was dumbfounded by this scene. The place that the dwarves chose to build the city wall was naturally the narrowest and steepest part of the mountain path. It was 200 meters long from left to right. It sounded very long, but in fact it was absolutely extremely narrow for a battlefield. Excluding the taller and sturdier bastions that protruded from the city wall, the actual length of the wall was only 150 meters. It was guarded by the various tribal chiefs, and regardless of whether they were ordinary soldiers or elites, they would be annihilated no matter how many came. Seeing that the number of the undead army was gradually increasing, Wajin waved his hand, and immediately the orcs on the bastions worked hard to shake the handle of the pump up and down, using the FFF flamethrower that once terrified the tribes, on the undead army. The city defense version of the flamethrower was even more insane. After the improvement, the fire oil was clearer and had a higher burning ratio. Due to the 45-degree mountain terrain and the fact that they had the upper hand, the flame tongues could easily be ejected 100 meters away. After a few rounds, the 8 bastions had turned the narrow mountain path into a flaming purgatory. With the explosions of the small cannons and the sprinkling of the flamethrowers, even if there were occasionally elite abominations that were bathed in flames, it would only take a single strike from an orc centurion or oxhead warrior. Grom held Blood Roar in his hand. His eyes seemed to have traveled through time and space, back to the Grand War era. Once upon a time, the battlefield between the Alliance and the Horde was a battlefield dominated by strength, skill, and courage. That was the era when the elites of the Divinity tribe who had experienced the Divinity War wantonly flaunted their military might. That was until a human named Duke Marcus appeared out of nowhere and completely changed the situation of the battlefield. His little invention, the F-type flamethrower, had caused the 100,000 elites of the Warsong clan to be unable to advance an inch in the Silverpine forest. They had no choice but to rely on the Blackrock tribe, which had innate fire resistance, as their main force. Unexpectedly, after 13 years, it was the orcs' turn to use fire to deal with the Calamity army. "Be careful!" Varrock suddenly shouted. Everyone suddenly realized that there were many giant abominations wrapped in a frosty aura that boldly charged through the dead zone of the cannonballs, passed through the sea of fire, and killed their way to the city wall. "Use fire bombs!" Thrall ordered decisively. At the back of the platform on the city wall, the orcs hurriedly threw out the metal shells in an extremely rough manner. Then, when the so-called fire bombs were thrown into the sea of fire, an even more intense flame burst forth. The temperature was so high that even the orcs standing upwind couldn't stand it. Not to mention the abomination in the sea of fire. The high temperature caused its fat body to continuously lose weight. The essence of a corpse was still fat and bones. As long as the fire was strong enough, the abomination itself was a huge flammable object. The abomination that had worked so hard to break through the purgatory was defeated just like that. If the Burning Legion is only at this level, let alone 3 days and 3 nights, I can even defend for a week. A young orc warrior said proudly. As if it was a slap to his face, a large group of gargoyles began to fly over from afar. Thrall's face darkened. Get the wolf riders ready to throw themselves into the net. At this stage, the tribe was so poor that they didn't even have many wyverns. How could they fight against thousands of gargoyles? Fortunately, the special nature of Mount Hyjal reduced the height at which the gargoyles could climb. Otherwise, there would be no need to fight at all. In fact, other than the net, the tribe's more effective long-range weapon was the less efficient javelins in the hands of the trolls. Of course, the tribe still had shamans. Unfortunately, shamans were so rare. They were all treasured and feared to melt in the palm of their hands. Other than leaving them to the rear to treat the wounded, Thrall would not let the shamans go to the front line until the last moment. At this time, Bulang, who was on the third city wall, accidentally fired his larva of the giant worm. Bang! A huge gunshot rang out, giving the surrounding alliance warriors a fright. Bulang's face was not red, and his heart did not jump. He was full of nonsense. You don't even understand this. I fired the gun as a signal to tell you that it's time to load Type 3 bullets. The so-called Type 3 bullets was also Dew's bad taste. When he came up with this idea, he didn't expect the dwarves and gnomes to come up with it. However, the dwarves weren't afraid of having a big brain. They were afraid that your brain was not reliable and would waste a lot of materials. Duque, who seemed to have a big brain and was reliable, was naturally the god of invention among the dwarves. During the 10 years he was away, the dwarves regarded Duque's idea as the Duque Bible, and developed the Type 3 bullets, and mass-produced them. The dwarves' version of Type 3 bullets used a large shell with many burning bullets in the shell. Using the small steel cannon as an example, the shell was 1 meter in diameter, 3 meters in length, and weighed 1,360 kilograms. There were 996 to 1,200 bullets in the shell, and there were many versions such as the small steel cannon and the small Duque cannon. Once it was fired, it would be like a goddess scattering flowers. No matter how many air forces there were in that area, they would all be wiped out. What? You're asking why they didn't just use shotguns, such as the grape shot from the cannon? The grape shot's range was too short, it couldn't hit far. Moreover, if they fired from the back of the orcs, once the shell couldn't go around the front wall and hit the orcs' butts, the Alliance and the Horde might start fighting before the Burning Legion could reach them. Just as Thrall was bitterly preparing to fight, the small steel cannon that had killed their predecessors opened fire again. It was different from the big shell that exploded when it hit the ground. This was a cone of fire that exploded in midair like a beautiful firework. Chapter 937. Half a minute ago, all the rookie orc warriors subconsciously raised their heads. With a slightly confused and helpless expression, they even forgot to hold up their shields, bitterly becoming witnesses to the spectacle in front of them. It was an enemy so dense that it looked like a dark cloud. The gargoyles, which were almost free of the shackles of gravity, had the strongest limbs, sharp and dark claws, a demonic face, and scarlet eyes that flashed with the most demonic fierceness. A moment ago, the entire defense line of the city wall was still bathed in sunlight, but suddenly, the sky darkened. The army, which lacked mobility, was passive whenever it faced the agile and soaring air force. Coupled with various factors such as range and hit rate, the Horde warriors could only be beaten up at this time. Originally, Sal was prepared to suffer heavy losses. Unexpectedly, as the roar of artillery in the distance behind him became more ear-piercing, Sal discovered with his amazing dynamic vision that the dwarves had changed the cannonballs to larger red cannonballs. They weren't blasting at the ground, but throwing them into the sky. It looked like fiery conical fireworks blooming in the sky, and they broke the black haze of death in a unique manner. Each red cannonball was equivalent to over 1,000 tiny flame warheads. They poured their destructive power unscrupulously into everything flying in the sky. Sal saw with his own eyes that a cannonball passed by, and the nearest gargoyle was directly turned into a sieve. The wings, which were as solid and thick as a stone wall, were full of holes of all sizes. The head and chest, which could have been broken with a sledgehammer, were full of potholes and continuous cracks. The mountain path of Mount Hyjal, which had a limited flight altitude and area, was definitely the best place for the dwarves' magical cannonballs to show off. With one shot, at least 30 or 40 gargoyles fell from the sky. The originally dense and numerous gargoyles were like dark clouds, but after a few rounds of artillery fire, they suddenly became riddled with holes. Many gargoyles, after falling from the sky, still did not completely lose the ability to move. They still drove their burly bodies to climb in the direction of the city wall. Sal curled his lips. Wajin. Understood. Groups of dark spear trolls rushed to the top of the city wall. They stood behind the orc warriors, stretched out their slender arms, and swung their arms to throw out round stones. When it came to throwing, the trolls had a talent that the beast men could never hope to match. Stones the size of kettles drew a straight line in the air and struck the gargoyles on the ground. Crack! Crack! The sound of rocks shattering rang out everywhere. Ha ha ha! Awesome! This feels so King good. The orcs and oxhead warriors were still cheering loudly even though they were defending the city walls. The miserable state of the enemy was their best stimulant. At that moment, people from the Alliance arrived. A small group of knights found Thrall, who spoke awkwardly in orc language. Your Excellency, the first line of defense is saturated. Vice Commander Turalian hopes that you can temporarily abandon the first wall. Give up. We've only just warmed up. There are so many good lads behind us who haven't even touched the enemy, Tauren Chief Kane muttered. Sal looked at the continuous walls on the mountain road, and then looked at the death passage in front of him that had been filled with corpses. He waved his hand to stop Kane. No, we have lost the geographical advantage. We still have to defend for a long time. Retreat. The messenger knight was relieved. Tribal warriors who have just been injured, please retreat first. Behind the second line of defense, there will be specialized medical teams to take care of them. Don't worry, it's not just the dwarves' cannons. The night elves and blood elf sentries and rangers will cover your retreat. Thank you. Sal replied humbly. The messenger knight raised a red flag and waved it behind him. Sal immediately felt the cannons behind him become more intense. The cannons in the sky and on the ground were at least twice as dense as before. Apart from a few accidental injuries, 99% of the cannons hit the burning legion. He nodded in satisfaction and had his men cover each other's retreat. Over 10,000 tribal warriors were divided into 4 teams. 3 teams retreated first, and the 4th team stayed until the first 3 teams entered the 2 gates of the second line of defense before retreating. At that moment, the zombies and ghouls that were rushing up were stopped by the extremely accurate and sharp rain of arrows. The abominations and gargoyles were greeted by the dwarves' cannons and muskets. The tribe only paid the price of less than 100 lives before successfully retreating. Damn it, I should have adjusted the shooting parameters just now and blown those damned green dwarfs and the undead monsters away. Param cursed. Bulang slapped his forehead. Why didn't you say so earlier? The dwarves were speechless. But more dwarves looked at the few human knights sent by the Alliance General Command. The dwarves finally knew what these humans were here for. They were afraid that the dwarves would act recklessly when they were hot-headed. On the Burning Legion side, a fierce debate broke out. The Dreadlord, led by Ansaron, thought that they should slow down and find a countermeasure. The Alliance's cannons are too powerful. We don't have enough cannon fodder, and the terrain is too narrow. It's not a good idea to attack blindly. The Lord of the Abyss, Asgalar, sneered. Ansaron, you've been in this world for too long. Is your brain broken? The Burning Legion has destroyed countless worlds. This one will be no exception. Ansaron's face darkened. This is the only planet where the Burning Legion has failed more than once. Even Master Sargeras has lost contact here. Since they were talking about their boss, Asgalar couldn't go on. Since you're so afraid, let me take the lead. The Lord of the Abyss moved his fat, 4-legged lower body, picked up the heavy double-headed double-edged sword, and left with a laugh. Ansaron stared at Asgalar's back and spat. Idiot! I'll let you and your men consume the dwarves' cannons. As one of the first higher demons to enter this world, the Dreadlord had a full understanding of the combat power of the mortals in Azeroth. Before Archimonde's arrival, if it weren't for the Lich's solidification of the fortress and the effect of protective cannonball, condensed by a large-scale magic circle, the Scourge Legion would have been defeated and attacked to the city of Lordaeron. If Lordaeron fell, then the entire Lordaeron continent would likely become a piece of iron again, and the Burning Legion would have no way to attack. Fortunately, Archimonde arrived. After a while, seeing Asgalar's mountain-like figure, the human warriors on the second wall didn't look good. Mograine spat down the wall. I thought only the Horde was unlucky. Chapter 938. A 15-meter-high wall was the limit that the Alliance's engineering team could achieve in a short period of time. Even if cement was better than the old stone brick wall, there were still various load-bearing and foundation problems. Mograine knew very well that if it was the Alliance from 15 years ago, the brothers could only rely on wooden fences that were 5 or 6 meters high to resist the tide of the Burning Legion. However, reinforced concrete and so on could be used to block zombies and ghouls. In the face of such a great demon that was 8 or 9 meters high just by standing, it was simply a joke with their lives. Not to mention the Abyss Lord that looked a bit like a dragon man. If they didn't stop him before he reached the wall, the 3,000 Alliance soldiers on the wall would die. Call for help. Mograine ordered. Immediately, magic messages, bugles that represented a strong enemy and a call for help, and the most traditional way of sending messages on horseback were launched at the same time. The experts of the Alliance and the Horde learned of the existence of danger almost at the same time. Thrall, who had just entered the third layer of the wall to rest, frowned. Not only the reaction of the Alliance soldiers, but also his keen perception of the shock coming from the distant ground. Although he hadn't officially become a shaman, Thrall's natural talent was unparalleled. "Let's go up the wall and take a look." Leaving Varrock to look at the troops, Thrall immediately took Kane, Grom, Wujin, and the other chiefs and a group of personal guards to the third layer of the wall. The huge and terrifying figure in the distance was immediately reflected in the eyes of the experts of the Horde. Humph. Looking at this figure that was extremely similar to Manaroth, Grom immediately remembered the humiliation of being fooled. On the fifth layer of the wall, Kale, Bats, who had been pretending to be calm, was originally elegantly sipping black tea. Suddenly, his long golden eyebrows trembled, and his gentle temperament changed at that moment, becoming eager and full of fighting spirit. He was no longer the noble elf prince, and he could take the change in identity calmly. Because this was a sin he had done for the sake of family. For him, kneeling in front of the Sun Chaser King's court had already repaid all the kindness of his father, King Anastrian, who had raised him. All that was left was to wash away the shame of having once sided with the Scourge army. During this period of time, he had received a lot of supercilious looks. Wherever he went, the blood elves who used to be his compatriots would either openly or secretly point fingers at him. Thanks to Duque's effective guidance and suppression, the entire alliance treated him and his followers fairly well. He did not deliberately make things difficult for them or exploit them, nor did he use them as cannon fodder or complete impossible tasks. It was because of the fairness of the alliance that he desired to atone for his crimes. Facing the Burning Legion on Mount Hyjal was the stage that Kale, Bats had been looking forward to for a long time. That's right. Only the blood of the Burning Legion could wash away the stain on his name. I, Kale that Sunstrider, have never truly betrayed my own people. Even if I can no longer become a hero, I will at least become a man who can walk proudly on the land of Azeroth. The moment he received the magic message, Kale, Bat's eyes were filled with hope and desire. It's time for us Redeemers to take the field. The powerful warriors of the Alliance and the Horde are already at the front line. How can we fall behind? Yes. Your Highness. Caponia, Solarian, Saladre, Sagunnar, and other hardcore followers all stood at attention. They puffed out their chests and sucked in their stomachs, looking at their most respected prince with feverish eyes. Even if the world deprived Kael'thas of his noble status, in their hearts, Kael'thas would always be their prince. When Kael'thas opened the portal and arrived, the city wall was already full of Alliance and Horde powerhouses. There was a winding mountain road in the distance, and the left side was full of cliffs. Turalian pointed at the huge figure moving quickly along the winding mountain road and said in a worshipful tone, according to the intelligence that Lord Marcus, the commander of the Alliance, risked his life to retrieve, that huge half-dragon, half-human demon is the Lord of the Abyss, Asgalar. Excluding the giant bug Oro, who was destroyed at the camp at the foot of the mountain not long ago, he is one of the 6 leaders of the Burning Legion's invasion. He is quite difficult to deal with. What Lord of the Abyss, isn't it just a matter of my axe? After playing guerrilla warfare for more than a decade, Grom had to learn the common human language, and then he seemed to have learned what it meant to be arrogant. Mograine pointed at the large group of demon guards around Asgalar, who were also around 5 meters tall. If you can rush to the fatty under the protection of so many demon guards and kill him, then I'll respect you. Grom's face turned red. Thrall grabbed Grom and said in Orc language, if Duque hadn't saved you, you would have been dead. For Duque's sake, don't argue with his subordinates. If you're a man, then fight on the battlefield. Humph. Grom snorted heavily. Turalian coughed and continued, according to the intelligence, those are elite demon guards. Unless you're a powerhouse who has stepped into the hero domain, or a mysterious person who is at or above the Radiant Moon rank, you can't effectively kill them. Thrall asked, even your cannons can't do it? Suddenly, a loud and boorish voice jumped out from beside Thrall's legs, if it's possible, your dwarf grandpa wouldn't be here." Thrall was shocked. Only then did he notice that there was a dwarf not far away from him. It wasn't Thrall's fault. The Lordaeron area where he grew up had never been a dwarf's territory. Even he had only officially seen a large number of dwarves after coming to Mount Hyjal. He wasn't used to it yet. Facing the tribe's giant looking down on him, Bran Bronzebeard was even more upset. "What are you looking at? Do you believe that I'll shoot you if you keep looking?" The tribe's giants all said in unison, "Humph." Turalyon rubbed his eyebrows. "I still don't have enough reputation to control these warriors." He could only try to smooth things over and pretend that he didn't see their conflict. Then, the job of covering up will be left to His Majesty Proudmoore and the other four. Jaina, Ronan, Kael, and his 2 followers bowed slightly. As time passed, Asgalar and his men finally crossed the first wall. Standing on the first wall, Asgalar raised his heavy sword and slashed at a fort next to him. The heavy sword wasn't too sharp, but the combination of weight and strength was a terrifying destructive power that mortals couldn't imagine. The gigantic double-headed heavy sword cut through the entire fortress made of reinforced concrete as if it was cutting through an oversized piece of tofu. The sound of steel bars breaking and cement bursting could be clearly heard even from the second wall 200 meters away. Every single one of the soldiers of the Allied army held their breath. Chapter 939. The demon guards rushed past the Lord of the Abyss like a tide. The mid-tier liches behind the army worked together to cast a battle magic spell. It was a huge ice shield with a radius of nearly 1,000 meters. The cannonballs that crashed down were melted by the black icy aura in mid-air, unable to land on the demon guards at all. "Ha ha ha! Do you see this? Lowly creatures. Weak creatures like you don't even have the right to join the Burning Legion. It's futile no matter how you resist. Your only outcome will be the same as this tower, completely destroyed. Ha ha ha." The Lord of the Abyss, Asgalar, wasn't speaking in the common language of the beast men. Instead, it was a language unique to demons that could directly enter one's soul. The vicious words rushed into the hearts of every Allied army soldier without any hindrance. Tisk. Every Allied army soldier's face was filled with indignation. Those standing at the front of the city wall were either chiefs or queens. Even a clay figurine would be enraged after being humiliated by a greater demon who was so good-looking, not to mention a powerhouse who was at the top of an area. Jaina gave a thumbs up in a domineering manner. In the next second, she turned her wrist and pointed her thumb down. Only 4 cold words jumped out of the mouth of the newly crowned Queen Kultiras. "Kill them." In an instant, the 5 radiant moon archmages at the front of the city wall emitted strong magical waves that could be seen with the naked eye. Ronan was in the center, Solarian was on the left, and Caponia was on the right. Arcane energy condensed into a thick soup around the entire Archer Tower. Behind them, Jaina and Kael, rose slowly. Under Jaina's feet was an ice pillar that was growing taller and harder than steel. Kael, floated in the air on a spinning pillar of fire phoenixes. When the purplish-blue arcane radiance reached its peak, the 3 arcane masters pushed out their hands at the same time. Arcane energy so dense that it was almost solid shot out. "Go!" Jaina shouted angrily. "Kill!" Kael, murderous aura burst forth. When the ice and fire magic that was large enough to overshadow an entire team of sky archmages converged into that unparalleled arcane energy, an incredibly destructive war spell had been completed. Heavenly River of Frost and Fire. It did not exist in any single person's list of spells, and even Morning Star wizards did not have the control to use it. Only those at the peak of the Radiant Moon realm could perfectly fuse 3 different types of tremendous mana together to form this incomparably terrifying war magic. The surging yellow, white, and blue elements easily overturned all the beings standing in front of the second city wall. It didn't matter if you were an elite of the Burning Legion that roamed the universe or an abyssal lord that wreaked havoc across the stars. Even a Breaking Dawn mage might not be able to unleash such a powerful move, so all of you had to scram. Even though the abyssal lord Asgulr was filled with arrogance, he didn't dare to open his arms and take this blow head-on. He had no choice but to cross his arms and hold his heavy sword in front of him. Bang! With a momentum that was 100 times more amazing than the monstrous waves hitting the reefs on the shore, Frostfire Galaxy easily destroyed all the guards around Asgulr. Even the Abyssal Lord, whose weight was measured in tons, had no choice but to be blasted 100 meters away along with the first city wall. The magic circuits of the 5 Radiant Moon Archmages were empty, but their cloaks fluttered in the wind. Coupled with their proud expressions, everyone knew that they were feeling great. That's right. This was the ferocious might of magic. Annihilating hundreds of elite evil demon guards and liches with a single blow, as long as Mount Hyjal was victorious, the 5 of them would definitely leave a deep mark in the history of magic among humans and elves. Bastard! 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 Mere scum, how dare you send me, Lord Asgulr, flying? Unforgivable. Asgulr, who had just crawled out of the rubble with his armor still intact, had the word disheveled written all over his body. Feeling greatly embarrassed, he didn't care about anything else. Carrying his huge double-headed heavy sword, he charged towards the second city wall like a high-speed train. He wanted to use his unimaginable strength to directly destroy the defense line that these little bugs were so proud of and smash them one by one under the heavy sword. Suddenly, a khaki figure that was only half his height blocked in front of him. "Huh. You overestimate yourself. Go to hell." With the shocking impact of running at high speed, Asgulr launched a sudden stab with the heavy sword. In his imagination, even a mountain would be smashed by him, as if that kind of short and pitiful bug would definitely be smashed into pieces by the sword. He miscalculated. The wooden totem pole that was no smaller than his double-headed greatsword burst out with a green natural brilliance that he couldn't understand. Under the innate divine power of the Tauren, the totem pole and the heavy sword collided like stars. The final result was unexpectedly a draw. Cain Bloodhoof, who blocked him, staggered a few steps back. Even the solid ground couldn't withstand this terrifying impact. The powerful hooves forcefully kicked out stacked stone waves. Asgulr didn't have it easy either. Each of his legs took 3 big steps back. Finally, his 4 short legs couldn't bear his exaggerated weight, and he sat on the ground with a loud thud. This wasn't the end. Just before he sat down, the enraged Lord of the Abyss threw his terrible heavy sword at Cain. In the distance, Sal was so scared that his heart almost broke through the confinement of his ribs and flew out of his chest. Cain, who was still in a state of exhaustion after forcefully blocking the heavy sword, widened his bull eyes and looked desperately at the heavy sword that was inserted into his chest. "I can't dodge it at all." Anyone could imagine that in the next moment, the highest-ranking war casualty since the start of the Coalition War would be born. At this critical moment, a golden greatsword as wide as a door panel descended from the sky. Alexandros Mograine performed an extremely gorgeous jump slash and directly deflected the heavy sword of the Lord of the Abyss by a little. A slight difference could lead to a huge difference. The double-headed greatsword brushed past Cain's neck and cut off half of Cain's mane. It seemed that Cain's neck was bleeding, but people with discerning eyes knew that Cain's life was saved. Good job. Another gorgeous figure leaped high into the air. The violent scarlet axe drew the most amazing arc, crossed the space of 30 meters, and struck Asgulr's head with one move. With the smoke and dust raised when the Lord of the Abyss fell as the background, it was the figure of a powerful orc hero named Grom Hellscream. "I said that whatever Lord of the Abyss is just a matter of my axe." Chapter 940. Pretentiousness was like the wind, always with me. Lord Howl's pretentiousness was so off the charts that all the heroes who had just covered for him and blocked the sword for him were overshadowed. They all became mere background decorations. That's right. Without the cover of the 5 archmages, without Cain and Mograine to resist the attack of the Lord of the Abyss, Lord Howl could not find a chance to kill anyone. However, the beast men, who revered strength, would not care about this. Their eyes would only see the sharpest, and also the last move that would kill them. All of a sudden, all the orc guards who had followed Sal to the second wall let out a fanatical roar. Oh oh oh, hero! 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 The first warrior of the horde, Grom Hellscream. After the chaotic roar, it was the uniform roar unique to the horde warriors. Oh! 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 Every roar was accompanied by the raising of a weapon. The cold gleam of a sharp axe. The light of a heavy hammer. The cheers of only 100 people condensed the momentum of 1,000 people. The soldiers of the Alliance were also cheering, but unfortunately, it was not as enthusiastic as the Horde. After all, the last axe was not the hero of the Alliance. On the Burning Legion side, Dreadlord Ansaron could not stop scolding, "Trash! Trash! You're all trash!" Since landing, the Burning Legion had not encountered anything good. First, Reki Winterfrost was inexplicably ambushed by the Alliance commander Duque. His head was chopped off, and even his soul was destroyed. Then, the seemingly powerful giant Sandwormoro was killed by the enemy's ultimate move. Then, there was Asgalar, who was full of momentum but was killed by the mortal heroes in a few moves. The 3 chief-level guys all died a little inexplicably. Glancing at the extremely calm Kazroga and Kazak, Ansaron knew that Sir Archimond would not enter the field before confirming that the other party had a strong enough powerhouse. Both of them were Doomguard-type demon lords with special abilities. This time, he had to enter the field. On the bone thrones near Anartheron, there were 5 dreadlords with the same huge bone bat wings sitting on them. Although everyone was a dreadlord, there were still different ranks among the dreadlords. After the former leader, Tichondrius, was killed, Anasaran was now the most popular replacement leader. He needed a perfect victory to propel him to the position of leader of the dreadlords. He suddenly had an idea. Humans, elves, and orcs are all lowly and weak. Let the endless Burning Legion destroy them. He had seen too many mortals fiercely resisting. But how many mortals could maintain such a high-intensity battle? Regardless of whether they used holy light or swords, as long as they were mortals, they would tire, get injured, and overuse their life force and spiritual energy, or even die. After interrogating the souls of the dead at Azhara's beach and the camp at the foot of the mountain, they knew that the total number of people in the allied forces of the 3 factions on Mount Hyjal was not large. It would not exceed 200,000 at most. The Burning Legion's numbers were 10 times that of the allied army. And most of them were elites. After a little thought, Ansaron sent a small number of ice dragons and gargoyles in a rather sparse density. It would be too much of a loss if they swarmed up like before and were blasted down by the dwarves without even having to aim. Obviously, Anasalan's tactic worked. The Burning Legion's air force was larger in number but not too densely packed, forcing the Allied army's long-range firepower to pay more attention to the sky. Many times, the Alliance had to send the Griffins to contend with them. It was obvious that this was more effective for the Allied army to bleed. It was the same for the ground battle. The moderate but continuous attacks made the Allied army tired to deal with them. Basically, whenever the corpses in front of the city wall accumulated into a large slope, enough for the undead army behind to rush up, the city wall would be breached. In just 3 hours, the Burning Legion broke through 5 layers of the city wall in one go and fought all the way to the 7th city wall. At this moment, with the Horde's heroes as the arrowhead, the Allied army launched an extremely fierce counterattack. Under the cover of artillery fire and elven arrows, the Allied army actually fought their way back from the 7th layer to the 1st layer. What infuriated Ansaron was that the Allied army pushed a large number of fuel barrels and directly set fire to the mountain path. The intense fire with a temperature of over 1,000 degrees made it so that only the air force could pass through. Ansaron once tried to get the liches to use frost magic to extinguish the fire, but the effect wasn't ideal. Often, as soon as the fire was extinguished, more black oil would flow down from the mountain, and the fire would continue to spread along the black oil. And because of the solidified magic array on Mount Hyjal, no matter how fierce the fire was, it was only within the range of the mountain path and wouldn't spread up the mountain. This fire bought the Allied army more than 3 hours. The second time, Ansaron thought that the Allied army no longer had the black oil, so he ordered the Scourge Legion to launch another fierce attack. In the end, Ansaron was shocked to find that there were 7 more layers behind the original 7 layers of city wall. This time, they fought for another 3 hours. Then, it was the Horde who led the counterattack and chased the Scourge Legion back. After hundreds of dark specters were destroyed in a row, Ansaron received a piece of news that drove him crazy. The Alliance was frantically building the city wall along the winding mountain path at a rate of 1 layer per hour. That's right. Our mortal army can't outlast the Scourge Legion, but we can stall for time. If we can stall for 3 days, it will be the Allied army's victory. After realizing that the Allied army didn't mind stalling for time, Ansaron felt like he had been slapped in the face several times. No way. I have to do it myself. All of you, follow me. Behind Ansaron, 5 dreadlords followed. In front of him was a tidal wave of Abomination army and a group of about 100 Death Knights. Hundreds of hellfire over 10 meters tall held down the rear. In the sky, a huge death dragon was slowly circling, and thousands of gargoyles were flapping their black wings. The high-level dreadlord, Ansaron, was out. Logically speaking, this lineup should be punching Mount Hyjal, stepping on Azeroth, commanding the world, and no one dared to disobey. This, who the hell told you, Turalian, to use, Quell, Zaram, to release the meteor blast? And who told you, Mograine, to use, Ashbringer, to release the despicable Thunderbolt? You broke the rules. All of you broke the rules. Where's the referee? Yellow card. No. Red card and 100-game ban. Who are you? Who the hell are you? Ah, Yamit. In the face of the menacing Allied forces, Dreadlord Ansaron and his men beautifully pounced on them. Chapter 941. His surroundings were chaotic, and countless strange lights flashed in all directions around him. Ah. I'm going back. In the confusion, Duque felt that he had gone back. He returned to a warm but comfortable doghouse. He graduated from university and changed from a glorious university animal to an even more glorious person in society. He lived the fulfilling life that his seniors mentioned. Because the kind and generous landlord increased the rent every year, her flower-like daughter yelled "Sumida" all day long, and absolutely refused to spoil Duque, an ordinary great man who was far from being a little fresh meat. This allowed Duque to avoid a wonderful love disaster. Therefore, the single dog Duque decisively moved to a cleaner and tidier urban village. He lived in an independent kingdom that cost 1,000 yuan per 10 square meters. He lived almost every day at 2:00 in the morning, and he had to enjoy the scenery outside the window of the 3-hour subway. Ah! So comfortable. There were aunties dancing Little Apple at 10:00 at night, there were commercial flights flying at 3:00 in the middle of the night, there were daily demolitions of houses in the urban village that started at 6:00 in the morning and rented out to university graduates. none of this can affect my enthusiasm for the boss fight in Duque's territory. Damn, it's already the era of the monthly card. The only one who can fight me in reality is Brother Electricity. Ha ha ha. At this time, there was a mysterious female voice calling Duque. 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 Wake up. The world needs you. The demon duo called Kazroga and Kazak is too powerful, we can't handle it. Duque replied in a daze, Kazroga? Kazak? They are all antique-level weaklings. Who can't solo these days? Go by yourself, don't call me. The owner of the mysterious voice seemed to be angry, damn it. I'm not asking you to dream, I'm asking you to face the demon lord in reality. That monster that is 50 feet tall. Wake up, as long as the world is not destroyed by the burning legion, I will do anything you want. Duque smacked his lips, his voice deep and magnetic. Come on, let me swear on my conscience, I really can't do this job. I'm just a lowly and bashful boy who has never even touched a girl's hand. Ever since I was young, I didn't even dare to eat sh*t, and you actually want me to fight some demon lord? Are you kidding me? After saying that, Duque stretched out his right hand in a daze and touched his left chest. Yes, he touched it. Huh. Could it be that he had been training dumbbells too much recently that his chest muscles had developed so much? It was soft and bouncy. At this time, another enigmatic queen's voice appeared. His voice was filled with anger and a smile that no one knew what he meant. Hee hee. What a coincidence. I don't dare to eat it either. Suddenly, without warning, pa. A sharp pain on his left cheek made Duque's head spin. Duque, he forcefully opened his eyelids. He was awake. The first thing he saw was an angry Jaina and an extremely sullen Sylvanas. Ah. So I didn't transmigrate back. It's better not to go back. Think about it. I'll go back and be an engineering university animal. Before I graduate, I'll be a female pig competing with Diaochan. Every festival, I'll be showered with affection by a handsome guy who found a girl outside of school. I'll be fed dog food, and I'll be urged to submit my experiment report. After graduation, I'll have no money, no house, and no girls. Even if I'm handsome, it'll be useless. I might as well go to the hospital for a vasectomy. Moreover, I'm not handsome. Despair. I'm in despair for this world of dog abuse. Although in Azeroth, even toothbrushes, toothpaste, and toilet paper had to be researched by him, and every 3 to 5 years, there would be a world-ending crisis, but at least he had status, ability, and a harem here. Thinking of this, Duque sat up on the bed, his face facing the sky at a 45-degree angle. A crocodile tear fell from the corner of his left eye. Earth is too bitter, I'm not going back. Queen Sylvanas thought about what would happen if she slapped Duque awake. Maybe Duque would be like a wronged wife, or maybe Duque would be noisy. Queen Sylvanas wasn't afraid of any situation. Duque was the only one who was unusually silent and crying bitterly. Could it be that I interrupted the restoration of his magic circuit? Thinking of this, even the fearless Queen Sylvanas panicked. Ignoring the unreliable night elves, Duque was already the last trump card of the Alliance and the Horde. If something went wrong on Duque's side, the world might really be finished. Duque. I didn't mean to wake you up. The situation is too dangerous. Queen Sylvanas' voice unknowingly carried a faint sobbing tone and a pleading tone. Dangerous. Duque seemed to be talking to himself. Yes, more than 40% of the soldiers have been killed. None of the Alliance's masters died, but most of them are injured. The key is that we can't win against the 2 demon lords. Now, Mograine and Cain are at the front, Jaina said quickly. Duque suddenly fell silent. After a full 3 seconds, he suddenly came to his senses and grabbed Queen Sylvanas and Jaina's hands. Wait until we defeat the Arc-Herons. If I'm still alive, I'll be with the people I love and love me forever. The first half of Duque's sentence was not wrong, but the last sentence made Queen Sylvanas furious. Wait. You still want to be together? It's fine if the three of us go. I've tolerated Wuxia before me. Are you going to add those cats and dogs and messy women? Queen Sylvie suddenly smiled. Her smile was as bright as a flower. Duke? Yes? Your body, are you sure it's okay? Like the magic circuit or something? I'm fine. Duque, who didn't know that a disaster was coming, seemed to be still in a daze. Then, justice fell from the sky, and Queen Sylvanas slapped Duque on the right side of his face. You little bastard. This scene left the bystanders dumbfounded. Queen Sylvie stood up abruptly and rushed to the door with large strides. Suddenly, she stopped. With one hand on the door frame, she did not turn around. Although you're a bastard, seeing that you might be able to save the world, I agree. But I warn you, don't go too far, or I'll incite my sisters to leave you. After that, Queen Sylvanas strode out of the door, as if she was escaping. As soon as Queen Sylvanas left, Jaina also pulled back her hand that was held by Duque. She stood up, flicked her cloak behind her, and turned around. Duke Marcus, you think too highly of yourself. You actually want to take two queens at once? Who do you think I am? I'm the noble queen of Kul Tiras, Jaina Proudmoore. There's no way I'll give myself to a bastard who has a harem. After that, he used flash, and flashed out of the corridor. A few seconds later, Jaina's vague voice floated over from afar. If you can help me get revenge, maybe it'll be a different story. Why are all of you suddenly so arrogant? Chapter 942. At this moment, Sylvanas's voice drifted into Duque's ears from afar. If there's nothing else, quickly get out. There's a pause outside. You have 30 minutes at most, everyone is waiting for you. 30 minutes. That's enough. Duque smiled and lifted the quilt. Vanessa, who was waiting next to him, immediately stepped forward and handed over Duque's robe. Thank you. While putting on his clothes, Duque suddenly remembered, yes, Vanessa, the first slap on my left cheek was also from Sylvanas, right? Why did she hit me? Dear beast. Oh, Master Grand Duke Marcus. Hey. You did it on purpose, didn't you? A black line appeared on Duque's forehead. Vanessa calmly helped Duque tidy up his clothes while replying, No, it was a slip of the tongue just now. It's not like that on purpose. For example, Master Grand Duke Marcus, this is called on purpose. Duque suddenly had the urge to slap this talkative maid to death. But thinking that the Van Cleef family was actually loyal to him, he could only drop the idea. Although you swore in your dream that you were speaking from your own conscience, unfortunately, according to my observation as a mere maid, your conscience does not reside in His Majesty Proudmoore's chest. The maid continued to show off her venomous tongue. Master, although you swore in your dream that you were speaking from your own conscience, unfortunately, as a mere maid, your conscience does not reside in His Majesty's chest. Vanessa, who had undergone strict training to improve her manners, said in the most elegant and dignified manner and the most serious tone, the reason why His Majesty Sylvanas was so angry is probably because you could accurately pass through Proudmoore's breastplate defense line in your sleep and accurately grasp your conscience through the gaps in his clothes. At this moment, Duque only wanted to say, what the heck? In fact, Duque really wanted to ask the maid in return, if my conscience grew on your chest, then can I still touch my conscience to speak? After thinking about it, Duque gave up. If Vanessa suddenly had a brain cramp and fearlessly sacrificed herself to have a monkey with him, wouldn't she give birth to an enhanced version of the venomous tongue monkey? No, no, no. This scene was too horrifying. Duque decided to stop imagining it. Alright, in front of a great enemy, this kind of small matter should be put aside for now. After confirming his equipment, Duque strode out of the room. Since he was the boss, he naturally had the aura of a boss. As soon as he stepped out of the door, Duque discovered that Turayan was actually waiting at the door. However, Turalian's condition was a little bad. Not only was his armor damaged, but the holy light on his body was also a little weak. In the eyes of Pharaoh, who could sense the elements, every holy knight was like a gigantic light bulb. Regardless of day or night, they would emit light and heat in the elemental domain, clearer than a lighthouse in the dark. Turalian's holy light energy was at most 50% of its peak. It seemed that this was the result of a round of recovery. Report. Yes. Turalian replied as he secretly gestured. After a few steps, a face that Duque was familiar with appeared. She was Mograin's adopted daughter, the little priest, Sally Metwain. She followed Duque's footsteps and released a mixture of holy light with her hands, gently healing the wound on Duque's face. Duque was a little embarrassed. Don't mind my presence. This is just a minor subcutaneous bleeding. It will heal soon. Duque forced himself to divert his attention. It's already the third morning since you fainted. In fact, our results in the first 2 days were not bad. Although we retreated from the foot of the mountain all the way to the mountainside, we estimated that we killed more than 1 million Scourge and Burning Legion soldiers and elites. The key is that we killed the 2 leaders of the Burning Legion in your intelligence report, Abyss Lord Asgalar and Dreadlord Ansaron. Oh. That's not bad. The ones who dealt the final blow were the Orc hero Grom Hellscream and the Blood Elf hero Kale, that's Sunstrider. Huh. That's impressive. Duque was really surprised. Duque knew that Lord Howl had a halo that increased the attack power of the Abyss Lord by 1000%. Originally, it was Lord Howl who killed Manaroth with his axe twice in a row in history. It was not surprising that Duque killed Abyss Lord Asgalar again. What was surprising was that Kaizi actually went all out. Logically speaking, it was very difficult for mages to steal kills. Turalian added, in order to kill the enemy, Kale, that's transformed into a huge fire phoenix and crashed directly into the Dreadlord, burning Ansaron to death in close combat. Now even the Blood Elves have begun to praise his bravery. Although the Blood Elves seem to be unable to forgive his past betrayal, at least they won't be hostile to him. Wow! Kaizi was really trying his best to wash away the stain on his name. Walking out of the fortress, the strong sunlight almost blinded Duque. After recovering his vision, the first thing Duque saw was the traces of a great battle stretching from afar to near. Ever since Duque proposed the concept of the 1,000-layer skirt, the dwarves really took this move to the extreme. Within a limited period of time, he had recklessly built a total of 21 city walls. Then, he had built 49 bunkers on the relatively open mountainside. Damn, it scared Duque so much that he almost thought that Archimond was the monk who had to overcome 81 difficulties to go to the west to obtain Buddhist scriptures, and that they were the goblins who blocked his path to wealth. Okay, get to the point. The abilities of the remaining 2 demon lords are very strange. Mograine, Sar, and Grom have each killed the 2 great demons twice. But every time we killed one of them, the other one would go berserk, and not long after, the demon that was killed would resurrect. Once resurrected, the 2 demons will become a huge cocoon. No matter how we attack, we can't break the defense of the 2 cocoons until they regain their mobility at the same time. Turalian paused for a moment. I don't know if it's an illusion, but the time it takes for them to regain their mobility is getting shorter and shorter. It would have been better if Turalian didn't say it. Once he said it, Duque was stunned. Then he laughed out loud. Why was he laughing? Thinking back to the first time he played World of Warcraft, 40 little amusing friends gathered together, but they couldn't even get past the molten core's door god. At that time, looking at the ground full of corpses, it was really King tragic. Before Duque transmigrated, the version of the game was already very late. But the current timeline that Duque was in was only 15 years after the Dark Portal. Those tactics and boss strategies that were common in the eyes of the veterans in the future were all rare stuff in this timeline. Sure enough, only at this time, the power of the transmigrator's cheat would be off the charts. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. The tricks of the Burning Legion's great demons are not bad. But I, Duke Marcus, have seen through everything. Chapter 943. What were soldiers most afraid of on the battlefield? The first thing they feared was having stupid teammates. As the saying went, don't be afraid of a godlike boss, but be afraid of a stupid teammate. In fact, there was another kind of existence above a stupid teammate, which was called a boss who caused others to die. If your teammates were stupid, you might be saved if you relied on yourself to become godlike. If your boss was stupid and forced you to die, there was really no need to save you. Just write your will. The general was the courage of the soldiers. It meant that a cowardly general would definitely have a group of weak soldiers. Very few people knew that there was actually a saying, the commander is the soul of the general. After all, the generals were just the executors of the strategy. The most terrifying thing was the failure of the strategy. In a situation where even the generals were at a loss of what to do, if even the supreme commander did not know what to do, how could the soldiers have the courage to fight the enemy? Now, Duque's arrogant laughter was spread everywhere. In the ears of the soldiers, it was not frightening, but heavenly. However, I, Duque, have seen through everything. When these arrogant words were heard by the soldiers who were already beginning to feel uneasy, it was no different from a large dose of reassurance. That's right. The invincible commander of the Alliance, Lord Marcus, had found a way to defeat the enemy. What else do we have to be afraid of? At times like this, the reputation that Duque had made could play an unimaginable role. Without the reminder of the officer, the veterans had already automatically remembered the various glorious achievements of Duque in the past. Since the first battle at the Door of Darkness, every battle Duke fought, even if he lost, it was a glorious defeat. It was true that he had lost Stormwind City, but he had burned 100,000 orcs and let Lothar take the head of the first orc chief, Black Hand. In the face of the crazy attacks of the tribe, he had been defeated, retreated, and felt helpless. However, Duque seemed to be the embodiment of the strong will of the human race. By continuously uniting forces that could be united, he still led the alliance to become stronger and stronger even though he had to fight for tens of thousands of miles. In the end, he successfully turned the tables and defeated the orcs. It was the same this time. The death of the Calamity Army once shrouded most of the sky above the Rotterdam continent. However, Duque, the king, returned and led everyone to launch a counterattack. Tirisful Woodland was the only place left in Lordaeron. Apart from the Silverpine Forest, which was still filled with werewolves, most of the fallen areas on the Lordaeron continent had been recovered. That's right. That's right. As long as Lord Duke Marcus leads us, we will be victorious. Suddenly, in the distance, a wounded soldier with a broken arm struggled to run over, knelt on one knee in front of Duque, and asked excitedly, "Commander Marcus, have you found a way to win?" Seeing that the bandage on the soldier's shoulder was still bleeding, Duque couldn't help but feel a lump in his throat. "Yes, we'll use the heads of those two demons as tables later." "Thank you, Your Excellency." The soldier kowtowed heavily. Duque's bold words quickly spread. "Will we win in the end?" "I will. We will definitely win. Please take care of yourself, Your Excellency. I would like to have you present me with an award during the victory ceremony." I will. I definitely will. More and more soldiers gathered around Duque. Even the heavily wounded who couldn't get out of bed sat up with the help of their comrades. Not only the soldiers of the Alliance, but even the warriors of the Horde shouted and raised the weapons in their hands after hearing the translation. Swords and spears were like a forest, and the morale of the army was like a mountain. Thousands of voices were shouting and calling, and then converged into one, turning into a shocking sound wave that went straight into the sky. Victory! 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 Yes! We will definitely win. We have always believed in it. At this moment, on the battlefield in front of them. It was located at the entrance of the open land on the mountainside. Once they broke through, it would be a vast expanse of flat land. Other than the blockhouses built by the Alliance, there was no other place to defend. Although the narrow road from the mountainside to the top of the mountain was starting to build a wall, everyone knew that the wall was really useless against greater demons of such a level. The mortal soldiers in the coalition army had no choice but to risk their lives and rush up from the sides of the cocoons before they exploded to support their allies on the mountain road and the city wall. This was to stop the small fries of the Burning Legion and not let them affect the experts of the Alliance to surround and kill these two demon lords. Mograine was very tired. He leaned on the heavy Ashbringer and panted heavily. A third of his golden armor had already been torn, and he looked more like a beggar. Grom's famous blood howl was thrown on the ground in front of him. The incomparably strong man was currently covered in sweat, and he sat on the ground as if he had collapsed. The one who suffered the most was the Minotaur chief Cain. Because he was the largest and had the strongest vitality, he also suffered the most damage. Right now, Cain looked like a Fergana treasure cow. There were at least 100 large and small wounds all over his body, and all his hair was dyed red with blood and sweat. The blood seemed to be taking the opportunity to escape. Riataline was using all her strength to help him recover from his injuries. Holy Light Flash, and Holy Light, were thrown on the Minotaur chief like they were free. Just as every expert was dejected and panting in despair, trying to delay the arrival of the final moment, the sound on the mountain attracted their attention. That is. Wajin suddenly turned his head, his eyes full of confusion. Huh. Mograine laughed, who else could it be besides him? Sal's face was full of a bitter smile, although I don't want to admit it, we can only rely on him. At this moment, whether it was the experts of the Alliance or the tribe, they all thought of the same name. Sal secretly clenched his fist. He had Duque born him 15 years earlier. During Duque's glorious era, Sal was not yet born. When he grew up, Duque's glory continued. Then I, Sal, must work hard to build the tribe in the future, so that the tribe completely surpasses the Alliance. Create a glory that belongs only to me, Sal. Not long after. Surrounded by a group of soldiers, Duque arrived. Smiling, Duque came to the side of Grom, who was panting. Grom, are you tired? It seemed like a concerned question, but in reality, it was a provocation. How could Grom be provoked with a good temper? He coldly snorted and pointed at Karzak's giant cocoon. I can still kill this guy 10 more times. Duque patted Grom's explosive green muscles. You don't need to kill him 10 times, just one more time, and it will be over. Really? Grom's eyes burst out with a sharp light. Ha! At least we are still allies. I, Duque, never lie to my allies. Duque's words were sonorous and powerful. He. Grom stood up again. If he was a tired beast just now, then he had now transformed into the most ferocious berserker. His entire body was filled with a strong desire to fight. Chapter 944. Duke walked from Grom's side to Alessandro's side and lightly knocked on his golden breastplate with his small fist, producing a clear and melodious sound. Duque walked away just like that. Mograine smiled. This was the Duque he knew. They had been comrades for more than 10 years, and even a word of encouragement was unnecessary. That action just now had already said everything. There was no need to say anything, just follow with your weapon. Mograine's body, which was nearing 60 years of age, seemed to be suddenly injected with the strongest vitality. He stood up abruptly, his movements so nimble that no one would have imagined that this was an old man who had been exhausted just a few seconds ago. Veterans did not die. He used his actions to show that he was not yet at the level of a veteran. I, Alexandros Mograine, can still fight for another 10 years. Sal stood up and hit himself in the chest with a single fist, making a loud bang sound. Kale, that's stood up, his face full of hope for the future written all over his face. Cairn Bloodhoof stood up. He wanted to use his actions to tell the world the bravery of the Tauran tribe. Boulang took a deep puff of his cigar, then threw the remaining half of it on the ground, stomped on it a few times, and picked up his new gun with a crack. At this moment, a whistling sound came from behind Duque. He did not think that it would be Tyrant Whisperwind riding a tiger and rushing over with her sentries. She was surprised by the scene in front of her. Originally, she had heard that the Alliance and Horde's crusade against the Burning Legion had fallen into a desperate situation, so she had hurriedly brought people down the mountain to maintain the situation. This was because Malfurion still needed at least half a day. Who knew that she would see such a scene when she came down? Gazing at the faces of the strong, every face was filled with confidence again, and there was a faint smile on their lips. This was not something a group of defeated generals should have. Tyrant smiled too. Did I miss something? Duque's charming lips also curled into a smile. No. You came just in time. A good show is about to begin. If the heavy responsibility of saving the world was placed on the shoulders of an ordinary person, that person would either be driven crazy or be a Superman with a particularly big heart. Duque had never thought of himself as a Superman. I'm just a guild leader who's best at leading teams into instance dungeons. As long as I lead a party, even if I have to bet my life, I will be invincible, a certain transmigrator told himself. Listen to me and we will win. Duque didn't say it out loud, but the victorious expression on his face was so clear that it infected every expert of the Alliance or the Horde, making every expert choose to believe in Duque. Not far away, the giant blood-red cocoon that was the size of a small mountain began to tremble. It indicated that the two demon lords were about to awaken. A moment ago, every hero's heart was filled with worry and fear. They were not afraid of death, but they were afraid of being tortured to death without knowing why. A moment later, with the appearance of Duque, the atmosphere on the field completely changed. Now, every expert pricked up their ears and listened to Duque's orders. Duque snapped his fingers, and a huge blue arrow as tall as 3 people pointed to the empty space 100 meters to the left. Then, around the arrow was an illusory circle with a blue border. He opened his mouth and spoke in Orc language. Bloodhoof Chieftain, later, please pull Kazak over here. Try not to let him leave this area. Understood, Kane replied in a rough voice as he slammed the huge totem pole on the ground. With another snap of his fingers, Duke pointed to the right. Alexandros, bring Kazroga over here. Okay. The Ashbringer in Mograine's hand began to emit a golden light. As Dooku gave out orders one by one, every powerhouse understood their own responsibilities. These heroes that the players were familiar with were no longer the great existences that they could only worship. At this moment, they were just members of Duque's party. Come on. Believing in Duque did not necessarily mean eternal life. However, there was no need to say anything about killing a boss to get rich. There was only one sentence to describe it. Bro, steady. The huge blood-colored cocoon finally peeled off from the two demon lords and floated away. The heads with huge horns had just seen the light of day. They originally had mocking expressions on their faces, wanting to see how these mortals would struggle in pain and despair. In the end, they saw a group of heroes with completely different mental appearances. Before Kazakh could figure out what was happening, Cain had already let out a deafening roar. Cain's huge body charged forward. After his huge body, which weighed nearly 2 tons, entered the charge state, even the demon lord found it difficult to resist. Kazakh took half a step back with his right leg and turned into a bow stance. He blocked Cain's charge and used his arms to block the totem pole that was suddenly smashing down. He thought that the old bull's attack would stop there, but who knew that he would not be able to cause further damage to Kazakh. Cain rushed forward and blocked Kazakh's demon horn with his bull's horn. Then, bah! He spat on Kazakh's face. Before Kazakh's counterattack arrived, he did an ugly but practical roll and rolled away, avoiding Kazakh's counterattack. Cain beat his broad chest hard and roared again. There was no need to translate this posture. He was clearly saying, "Come on. Come on. Demon brat. Let's hurt each other." Old Bull's vivid body language ridicule, a performance that transcended the boundaries of race and language, opened the eyes of the powerhouses of the 3 sections. On the other hand, Mograine was simpler and looked much more serious. The power of Ashbringer was condensed into a line, easily crossing a distance of nearly 100 meters, and slashed at Kazakh's body. He was seducing this great demon. After so many battles, everyone knew that the most insidious thing about Kaz-Roga was his mark of Kaz-Roga. This evil curse that could not be lifted could periodically absorb mana from all heroes within the attack range for 5 seconds. Whoever did not have enough mana would directly detonate that unlucky person's magic circuit. Because of the intelligence, so far, no one had really been detonated. But this thing was disgusting. At least the paladins and mages in the main force of the alliance relied on mana to survive. This was why everyone was so tired. It was a double overdraft of the spirit and body. 100 meters was the maximum range of this evil mark. If Kazakh did not care about Mograine, Mograine did not mind being a long-range attacker and cutting it to death. If Kazakh went to kill Mograine, it would be exactly what he wanted. Sure enough, this great demon fell for it. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.